20th, 2021 meeting of the Louisville Planning Commission with a roll call vote.
Commissioner Deal,
Present.
Commissioner Williams,
Here.
Commissioner Moline,
Here.
Commissioner Howe,
Here.
Vice Chair Rice,
Present.
Chair Brownice.
Present. Thank you very much. With that, then, I would entertain a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
A motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Thank you. In a second.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, we will move forward with this evening's agenda. At this point then, I would open the floor to anybody who wanted to make a public comment for an item that's not on this evening's agenda.
Oh, wait a minute. Sorry to interrupt, but I want to disclose that I was not at the May 13th meeting and that I watched the entire meeting online. Thought it was a fantastic idea that you ended the meeting with taking more questions from the applicant with the Planning Commission and then going to public comment. I'm assuming we are going to do that still. And then also, I just wanted to say that, you know, I've read the entire packet and all of the thousands of email comments that were brought in over the last couple weeks. And I am ready and prepared to vote on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Appreciate that. So then we will double check. Lisa, can you confirm that you're not seeing any raised hands at this point in time?
Correct. I do not see any hands raised for items not on the agenda.
Okay. Then I will kind of begin with our kind of revised script. So I'm going to now reopen the public hearing on a request for the Red Tail Ridge General Development Plan Amendment. The purpose of this hearing is to receive evidence regarding the application materials and provide a public forum for all interested parties who wish to comment on this request before the Planning Commission. The procedure for all public hearings will be as follows. We have previously, at our last meeting on May 13th, had a presentation and testimony by city staff, followed by questions from the Planning Commission to staff. Currently, we have had the presentation and testimony by the applicant, and we are currently in the questions from the Planning Commission to the applicant. After these two presentations, members of the public who have joined this meeting by computer or telephone may speak regarding the application. Anyone who would like to speak is asked to use the raise hand function if participating by computer, or *9 if calling in by telephone. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. The purpose of public comment is to receive public testimony and not a forum for debate or dialogue. Commenters are encouraged to raise pertinent issues and may ask questions for clarity. However, these questions will not be directly answered during the public comment period. The applicant and staff will then be allowed to make a closing statement. I will then close the public hearing and no further testimony or evidence will be received unless the Planning Commission decides to reopen the hearing. The Planning Commission will discuss the matter and may approve with conditions, deny, or continue to a future meeting. Public hearings are recorded for the public record. All testimony must be presented after stating your full name and address. And Lisa, do we need to confirm proper notification?
No, I think that was covered on the last time. Since this is a continuation of a public hearing, no further notice was required.
Great, thank you. And then do any Planning Commission or members have any disclosures at this time? Seeing none, thank you. We will now proceed with Commissioner questions of the applicant.
Thank you, Chairman Bronice. Thank you, commissioners. We're here and we have our full assembled team as well. So happy to answer any further questions that you have.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll actually start. Commissioner Williams, if you'd like to go ahead.
If you want to start, that's fine. I don't want
No,
to.
that's fine. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Okay. So I had a couple questions. Everyone had fantastic questions at the last session, but I have a few. I want to kind of go back to, I know you guys discussed the lead standards, and you discussed the difference between gold and silver, and that you are seeking silver. And so kind of wanted to understand what is there, I'm okay with you giving just a huge ballpark, but what would be the financial difference between gold and silver in order to make this project make that leap? And I do understand the difference of why you think that it's more important for a downtown project to have gold, but I'm wondering why you don't feel this is important. So two parts of the question.
Yeah. Commissioner Williams, first of all, thank you for reviewing everything and watching the video and getting caught up from last week. We really appreciate that. Good question. I'm going to actually turn it over to Josh Radoff, who's our sustainability consultant, to address those. And Josh, you want to take a crack at that?
Sure. Very good and difficult questions. Let me start with the second one, because I think that's easier. I wouldn't say that we feel like gold is more appropriate in one place over another. I just feel like for the same level of design sustainability, within the context of a downtown location that has built-in density, walkability, and transit, versus one that is more suburban oriented that doesn't have those. It's just it's a different starting point for the number of points that a project has based on its location. So once you're there, the amount of things that you would do to achieve gold in a downtown, I think I was just sort of saying I would say that's about equivalent to silver in a non-downtown. This question came up last time, and there was a lot, I think there was a lot of interest in sort of unpacking a little more. I think one of the things that I wanted to, so I did a little bit of research just in terms of precedent. I think I would say most people are familiar with LEED under version 2009, and I think that's, and then LEED version 4 was updated not that recently. I don't remember when it was, 2016, 2017. So there's certainly been ample time for projects to be there. But under the LEED Core and Shell program, which we'd be talking about, just to sort of demonstrate that, there were something like 50 projects that had certified in Colorado under version 2009, according to the LEED database that I looked at, publicly available. And there were only 4 under version 4. So I think if there are, expectations that people have about what a LEED project does, my guess is it's likely based on that. But, I would hate to say that LEED, gold is like suited for one place and not the other. I'm just saying it's relative to like level of effort. Anyway, so that's, I guess, how I would speak to that. Your first question about the cost, LEED is which is a good question. And it's the sort of question I would say that sustainability consultants do their best to avoid answering. Because I think because of the point nature of LEED, right? Essentially means you're looking for an additional 10 points somewhere within the scorecard. So, and then if you were going to sort of look at the lowest cost pathway to do it, it might include something like, choosing envelope commissioning as something that you would pursue, even if it may or may not have value, whereas envelope commissioning would certainly have more value, I would say, in more of a high-rise location. Or you would just try to max out your energy efficiency performance through, equipment, through envelope performance, through internal load control to the extent that you can. Or you go a different direction, and you are, looking at just, really emphasizing, say, water efficiency as much as you can. I worked up a scorecard for this project and found us like, oh, getting to silver is certainly doable, but it's not like it's certainly not an easy home run. To get to gold, I'm eventually not going to answer your question. I think the answer is like, I don't know. It's hard to sort of put it into numbers without sort of doing a cost study on an actual building. I'm sorry to sort of end on such a disappointing note after what I do think is a good question, but hopefully the rationale on how we landed where we landed, somehow makes sense.
So let me ask a little bit different of a question that maybe might help you answer the first one. If we went the direction of having a cluster of buildings that are taller and less footprint, and more open space, is that more achievable to get to gold, or is that even more difficult?
I mean, I think it's more achievable. I think I don't know that it would help with the density credits, because the density credits are a function of both your own internal density and the density surrounding you. It wouldn't change the transit orientation. It would help with, I think, the ability to demonstrate more open space as a result of your clustering. But I was assuming that we would be achieving the open space point anyway, because I think there's enough open space there.
So that's just one of the components, but like how you build, how you build the structure, how that might change it to kind of move into
Sorry.
end of the 21st century.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I think the more that you can sort of like concentrate infrastructure into a given building, it's easier to sort of have, efficiency within that. I hate to sort of sputter because, there's like so many different pros and cons, and I'm trying to think about how it actually translates to like a lead point somewhere. I mean, I think from a non-lead perspective, from an overall sustainability perspective, there's no question that clustering is the right move. But in terms of like where it manifests itself on the lead scorecard, I'm struggling, and I may want to think about it and come back to you. But I just feel like I don't want to sort of say lead gold is impossible. I think, I remember what I was going to say. I think one of the things that's really challenging about lead core and shell is that lead doesn't allow you to take credit for what tenant efficiencies do. And so it's a real awkward kind of game about like, if you don't know tenants, the opportunities for that are lower. And so at an early phase in development for core and shell projects, they generally don't know tenants. And it's hard to be over ambitious, until you're able to essentially until you're actually able to find tenants. I don't know. There's been some commentary about lead core and shell being a little dysfunctional as a result of that. But that's an aside. I think it just, from a practical perspective, makes it harder to be confident about something beyond silver, I would say, at a project like this at an early phase.
So when you're choosing tenants, is this something you can mandate? Is this like, are you just telling them, oh, we hope to see you get to silver in your build here, or in your way of managing your business? I mean, is there any way that you can get businesses to get to gold?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I think I would differentiate between lead core and shell, which is what this developer would take responsibility for. And then there's another program called Lead for Commercial Interiors. So it's possible that tenants would come in and want to do their fit out, which only then looks at the interior of the space to LEED standards. Part of our approach is to write, and there's a LEED core and shell point for this, to write guidelines for tenants to inform them. But ultimately they're guidelines. The easiest way to do it is to essentially point them to jurisdictional codes that are going to require them to sort of have a high bar. But yeah, I mean, I think there are, even if we were essentially write design requirements for incoming tenants, LEED has limited your ability to take credit for that within your own core and shell approach. So again, all those things are good ideas and potential ideas. They just sort of like still may be challenging within the LEED kind of core and shell environment.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that information, and I hope that we can go closer to gold or get there in some way, shape, or form with this project, being that it's going to be here for a pretty long time. And then just to kind of segue that, you were talking about tenants, and I was wondering if you anticipate specific types of tenants that you hope to come in, and what kind of triggers each phase of the project. I assume that you have phases of the project, and how many phases of the project do you plan on executing?
Sure. So from a tenant type, obviously we don't know, and we don't know what tenants are going to be out there. That said, here on the US 36 corridor between Boulder and Denver, clearly it's very tech oriented, it's very engineer oriented, and we've got an innovation theme to the campus and our placemaking. And you heard Rob Berg talk about that in the presentation a little bit. I'll tell you right now that, you know, kind of biotech is very big, life sciences are very big, medical devices are very big, like a Medtronic. And so that sector seems to have a lot of wind at its back right now. And so I can envision that, but I also envision, given the scale and the different uses and office and life science and lab and some R&D buildings, really a really nice kind of coming together and coalescing of these different uses. So really the theme is innovation, but we're not, you know, that's not to say a aerospace engineering firm, and of course there's a good concentration of those in Colorado, wouldn't come and be a wonderful addition to the site. So if I'm guessing and placing bets, it's the life science and biotech and technology type tenants, but with an R&D focus. And that's clearly just based on the market and the area here in the Boulder and Denver corridor. Oh, phasing. And so phasing, we do have different phases lined out. And of course, this is a long-term project. Phase one is really based more on infrastructure. And so when we put in the infrastructure geographically, that'll sort of say where the phases go. But we have not, Commissioner Williams, gone to the point of saying, okay, we're going to build this exact building first and then go. We're just really getting the GDP first, and then we'll formulate that plan.
Okay, and sorry. We have a like echo here. Sorry, I just wondered what you were thinking that would trigger each phase. I'm assuming there's some sort of financial piece or tenant occupancy percentage, something that triggers each phase as you move through. What is your anticipation on that?
Yeah, I would say from a trigger, a couple of things can be a trigger. One, you could have a major user who decides that they want to be on the western side of the parcel, you know, overlooking the Flatirons and the views there on parcel, what we refer to as parcel E, or the west side of parcel A. Well, that could require additional infrastructure to put in, and that would sort of be a non-linear phasing, if you would. And so other than that, I think you're phasing logically from east to west outside of some big moving pieces. You know, from that, the main access point, which would be what's currently called Date Drive and Northwest Parkway, and moving to the west is logical based on the infrastructure, because of course we're starting with Campus Drive and Sorrel, and then a link over on what's now Tape to Northwest Parkway. So that's really, the infrastructure drives the phasing quite a bit. And then on top of that, it'll be user demand that drives it. There's not I don't have a set threshold for build out necessarily, but it'll be some logic in how this unfolds. And we're not gonna try to, unless it's a major user, we're not going to try to, we're going to try to keep things sort of uniform, if you will.
Okay, thanks for that. And then I'm just going to kind of stay on the same topic, and then I have a completely different topic.
Sure.
So, after the pandemic, there's like new trends that are happening for office space and how people are working from home or anywhere, and I'm wondering how that plays into this development and how you are thinking about in those terms.
Well, as you can imagine, we've thought about that a lot over the last 12, 15 months with this pandemic. And I actually view it, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but I actually view it as sort of an advantage that we'll have because we don't have product on the site, because we're creating new product. And we're able to create a product that then will satisfy needs of tenants. I think, and we're guessing just like sort of the rest of the world and how this is all going to unfold, but health seems to be a driving factor, and it's really gone to the surface for a lot of tenant needs. Kind of how do you incorporate indoor space and outdoor space and blend those? And that's something we're already working with Architect on a different project, not here at Red Tail Ridge, that's further along, on really melding those, creating this outdoor space. How do you create places, communal places in a development where people can go outside, take a break from being in their cube or their office, have access to Wi-Fi and the technology that they need, collaborate, work there? I think is a kind of a wonderful blend of what the market wants, but also works well with sort of this post-COVID environment. So a lot of thought has gone into that. And I think it's, honestly, I think it plays to the strengths of Red Tail Ridge. It's the trails and the open space and feeling like you have room and feeling like you're outside and you're healthy. And so I really feel like that'll be a focus of ours for sure, because it needs to be, because you need to speak to what employers want and what their employees need. And I think it's going to be a lot of those themes. When COVID first started, everyone was so scared that it was, well, how, it's non-touch elevators and it's, how do you enter the building? I feel like the market's gotten past that a little bit, but it's really been a focus on just health, indoor, outdoors, more space, and that sort of open feel will be a focus of ours. Okay,
so you're not thinking, or you're not worried that businesses are going to be doing, a 180 and going, you know what, we don't need that much building. We're going to actually sell off some of our building and consolidate because we're going to have a third of our workforce work from home or wherever. You're not worried about that trend. That's not a piece to this component that concerns you.
Well, I worry about a lot of things, and that would probably be on the list of things I worry about, but I think of long term, and I feel like people are social beings, and I feel like while a trend and there may be a blend work from home, I think it's very hard for businesses to create and maintain a culture without central office space. And that's been a number one thing I've heard. And I mean, we could talk about it a long time, but my sense is that the market comes back, and it comes back probably quicker than we all think. Will it have changed? Of course, it's going to have changed. And will that impact demand? It's hard to tell. And I think, this is where location comes into play, where really catering to tenants' needs comes into play. And so, yes, it's a concern, but no, I don't think it's a debilitating issue for this, and especially given the long-term nature of the development.
Okay, thank you for your perspective on that. I appreciate it. And let's see here. I think that's all my questions for now. I'll let somebody else speak.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Williams. I had a few questions that are kind of focused on some of the statements in the sustainability commitments document, but also kind of interested in the bigger picture of it, starting with some of the smaller scale ones, right? It says there's a commitment to native and water-wise landscaping elements being prioritized. with turf only being provided if deemed necessary. Can we talk a little bit about who determines that and what the criteria would be?
Sure. Josh,
In the larger, actually, let me actually paint a little bit larger picture question there.
Sure.
Is right, any number of the public comments are rightfully concerned about water. And we know that when our next drought happens, that we will have water restrictions within the city. And so I think a lot of people are concerned that why would we go ahead and commit to, additional use of water if not necessary.
right. So Josh
Uh,
and or Jordan.
yeah, Jordan, do you want to take it or shall I?
I mean, I can speak to, I will say from the developer standpoint, water is a valuable resource. It's also incredibly expensive. So I actually see quite an alignment of the value proposition of being very smart and responsible and efficient with the design of the landscape. And that specific comment, we worked with that language, working with Katie Baum. So I'm sure we could work with her to further refine that. But that's all I have to say on that for now.
Okay. And then regarding the development of a green infrastructure plan to manage stormwater, knowing that the stormwater has to be managed on site regardless, how would this green infrastructure plan vary from kind of what's required as a result of the site being what it is?
That one I could speak to. Jeff, is that all right?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think the intent when we talk about a green infrastructure plan is to avoid this sort of more traditional taking stormwater from hardscape surfaces, rooftops, and parking lots, and putting it underground in a pipe, and then sending it off to an on-site stormwater pond. But rather to have a lot of the parking lots and rooftops drain into vegetated areas, spaces in between parking lots, treescaped areas to the extent that we can, so that you're having essentially green natural systems conveyance of that filtration along the way. And also essentially where there is a pond, I think. Maybe we could all try to conjure in our head the worst stormwater pond that we've seen, something that's just a pit with grass in it, as opposed to something that has been more of like a rain garden type approach that's been excavated, that has permeable material in it, and that really presents itself as efficient, functional landscaping, where someone would want to go walk and sit, or that would, be part of a habitat area. So I think those are the general elements that we had in mind with the green infrastructure plan. It doesn't mean, just to clarify, that it's just another way to sort of meet the stormwater regulations, I think, in a way that brings about more amenity and benefit.
Great, thank you. And then it also mentions if raw water rights are available, these will be used for the limited or irrigation demands of the site. At this point in time, I expect that we might know what's available out there. And
We do.
Okay,
There
great.
are a variety of, I'm sorry, was that the question I'm?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so there are water rights available. There's two different sources. The quantity of which is obviously very variable depending on the two sources. And so the language really, I think what would happen in all practicality is one of those water rights shares that generates the most water ends up being on the western side of the site. So I think it would be more efficient for a vertical entity that would build on the western site to be able to work with the capturing and efficiency of that raw water. So that's one area. There's also some near the pond area on the eastern side of the site, but it's very, very little. But where we can use, that's the intent of that language and what the rights are available.
Great, thank you. Any number of public comments were also concerned, again, appropriately so, about global climate change and energy and carbon. The Sustainability Action Plan does our sustainability commitments document does speak to a fair number of this. Again, there though, right, the commitments are to meet the energy code, submetering, and solar ready. Given the strong concern from both public comments and perhaps myself at this point, for addressing this, and then you do speak to some building electrification, but I'm not seeing much in the way of teeth to it at this point in time. I'm wondering if any of that has progressed in the ensuing time as to what Brew Balkel looks forward to doing.
Yeah, and Chairman Brown, it's a good point. And we have taken the last week and we have focused more on that and absorbing a lot of the, all the same comments that you're absorbing and reading through the comments. And we've responded and we've listened. And so Josh, actually, if you don't mind, I'll turn it over to you and maybe you can walk through some of the changes we've made and talk about the goals and the commitments.
Sure. I mean, I think it was, I think in reading through the comments and hearing the questions, I think our team didn't have a lot of disagreement with the need for the emphasis that was brought up. I think, in our minds, a lot of the goals that we set out were things that we, intended to do. And I think maybe a lot of it was sort of a difference in perception, and which I understand. I think you don't want to sort of allow for a backdoor for something not to happen. Whereas from our perspective, we want to be able to sort of manage risk of unknown as a project proceeds. But, for example, with solar, yes, solar ready as a minimum, something that we could control really well. I think we had a lot of back and forth about hesitancy about like what's an appropriate level of commitment, given that the environment might change. And for me, the thing that keeps me up at night is that Excel changes their rate structure or it changes their incentive programs or tells us that, they're going to change their net metering approach. So anyway, just to sort of give a sense that I think a lot of the comments were right on. And I think that we sort of echo a lot of the sentiment in terms of the needs that people identified. And that, and so we went back and talked about, well, what could we sort of move from a goal to a commitment? What could we sort of say, well, the risk of like those things I identified just now for solar, are they really that likely to sort of take place, which is a hard thing to know. So I guess having said all that, for solar, we think that we can move from solar ready to an actual commitment of solar installation. We think an appropriate minimum amount to commit to is 2 megawatts on the site, which would be I believe a significant amount of solar on there for those who are not versed in megawatts and so forth. I would say a typical house might use 5 to 10 kilowatts. 2 megawatts is 2,000 kilowatts, so that's about 200 to 400 homes worth of solar. I think we would want to make sure that was phased with the phasing of the development, so that it was, commensurate with what was there. How that happens, and there were comments about different ways to pay for things and so forth. I think there's a number of ways that can take place. But again, I think for me, the biggest risk is that the programs with Excel or the rate structures with Excel change in a direction that's not favorable. There's a limited amount of commercial industrial solar projects, not for any reason except for the rate structures aren't super advantageous to it. But I think our point is like we heard what you're saying and want to commit to a significant solar contribution. There's a couple other ones you mentioned, if you don't mind, Commissioner Brown, I can continue.
Please.
Okay. The other one, the next one is kind of an easy one, which was an oversight, I would say. Someone mentioned heat island effect. And so I think we're totally willing to commit to having white roofs or roofs that meet the LEED solar reflectance values that would be required. So I just wanted to mention that. It wasn't included because it was just mostly an oversight, or that would be picked up in a LEED approach. So that's another thing. The other big thing, I mean, honestly, the 3 big themes around sustainability that I heard were solar, LEED, which we discussed, and electrification. And I think electrification is also where things are moving. I think we want to see things move in a given way. I think the unknowns or the challenges for this development is it's commercial and industrial. Industrial users may have certain process loads, or there might be, a commercial restaurant that might want to continue to cook with gas. So, an all-out sort of ban on gas felt difficult, but, in reflecting on it this week, we think, for the office product, in particular, there aren't a ton of all-electric office HVACs in Colorado yet. I could think of a few, and others might be able to think of a few as well. I think many in the current design phases are moving that way, but we felt that that it's the right thing to do to commit to all electric HVAC for all the office product that'll be there. That's something that we know electric can sort of meet the needs. And I think we will, strongly encourage any other tenants that sort of require gas to sort of use gas only for that process use and not for anything else. So again, those were the areas that we felt like were good points that the public brought up, that some of you commissioners brought up, and that we felt like we could respond to, and hopefully that feels like a meaning. Hopefully, sort of like understanding our thinking behind it is meaningful, and the actual commitments themselves feel meaningful.
Great, thank you very much.
Chairman, if I could just add just one quick comment on that, in response to your question. It's not to take away from the goals either. And I want you to know that we're really committed to the goals there too. And I know there's commitments in their goals, and that's really just us layering in flexibility, because this is a long-term project and we don't know where the market and where things are going to go. But the goals laid out, and we worked hard on that plan with Josh and putting that together. One, we're committed to those goals as well, even though they're not formal commitments. But two, and this is, I think, even the better alignment, is this is where the world is going. There's down South Indiana, not too far, I'm assuming it's Arvada, there's a gas station under construction. And I drive by and I think, who is building a gas station? Like, I can't even get my arms around it, because the world is clearly going to electrify vehicles. Buildings are going to come right after that, if not, already starting to come. So there's an alignment that I just want to express, that we are comfortable being on the front cutting edge. We're trying to work in some flexibility, just so we don't put ourselves in a corner too deep that we're not marketable and we're not in the market. But there's a clear alignment for what our goals are, where the market's going, and where we think tenants will want as well. So we feel really good about that part.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Deal.
Yeah, I guess just on the same topic, you mentioned the 2 megawatts of solar and other kind of enhancements to the sustainability program. I guess mechanically, how is that kind of added into the GDP amendment? Is the sustainability plan going to be revised? Is there a revised memo? And just a point too, Jeff, on that final point about goals, right? We all have goals, but I think if you're sitting where we sit, right, it's trust but verify. So what's actually enforceable from either a tactic standpoint or a goal, right? Because at the end of the day, with some of the language, we'll endeavor to evaluate. Well, we evaluated and we couldn't do it. Sorry. We couldn't meet the goal. So I think that's what we're looking for. And I think you're going to find certainly from city council as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I know, Jordan, you want to mention?
Yeah, mechanics on the process. So we'll update the memo with a more current date with the additional commitments that we have reflected and represented this evening. So those will be baked in and clearly delineated as additional commitments.
Okay, great. If I could just keep going, just a little bit of a different topic on transportation and traffic. Do you have the traffic consultant here tonight?
We do.
Great. So obviously, I think we all experience the level of service around the school at the morning hour, especially maybe in the afternoon hour as well. And I have two questions. The campus drive, in terms of phasing, when would that go into the development? And then maybe the consultant can comment on, would we see immediate kind of remedy from some of the traffic today?
Well, I'll let Bill Fox, our traffic consultant, come on. I don't see him yet, and Lisa, I don't know how we, does he raise?
Yeah, Amelia, if you're able to.
And I think it's just good.
There he goes. But to answer the first part of your question, Commissioner Deal, Campus Drive is the first thing we're doing. It
Okay.
is in phase one, and it would be the first thing that happens without question. So that's part one, but then I'll turn it over to Bill.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't think you can see me, but hopefully you can hear me. So for sure, Campus Drive goes in right away, and that should have an immediate noticeable improvement on traffic in and around the 88th corridor, the Dillon Road corridor, and around the schools, independent of anything else that happens on Red Tail. That connection will allow the access to the school to be distributed much more efficiently. And I don't know how much of a 391-page report you read, but it says in there that if you don't extend Campus Drive, at some point you will need to widen 88th to 4 lanes. You'll need to add turn lanes at the Dillon and 88th intersection. And with Campus Drive connection, the need for those 2 major improvements go away. So that should have an immediate and very beneficial improvement to the area.
Great. And then on the same topic of transportation, your presentation last week, you made comment about the Flatiron Flyer. Is that the bus route? And I guess what commitments have you gotten from RTD, or how do we kind of ensure that that will actually happen with the development?
And when Commissioner Deal, when you say that will happen, you mean the connectivity, sort of the last mile? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, to have the flyer, the express bus kind of come into the parcel is what I was envisioning. Maybe I misunderstood.
I'll tell you first, I would love it if the flyer would come into the development. And while we've had conversations with RTD, as you can imagine, that's a long and political process because they have the Flatiron stop so close. It's really hard for them to commit and say they'll do another stop, which is why we're focused on how do we utilize the current stop, which is, as I mentioned last time, it's 2,800 feet from our front door to that stop, but that's too far. We can't commit on people walking that. So how do we connect people? So in our transportation demand management plan, we've got shuttles and other commitments there that to get them that we would be, or the Metro District would be funding to do that. So Jordan, I don't know, do you have anything to add to that?
I think RTD is a referral agency on our application. Are you hearing a big echo when I speak?
No.
Okay. RTD is a referral agency, so we have been trying to solicit comments, and I do believe staff had a meeting with them, so we should have Rob speak to that. But I know, Bill, you could speak to some of the more rapid bus plans along the perimeter of the property if you want to share that. I think that'd be good helpful insight.
Sure. I think I'm unmuted. In addition to the Flatiron Fire, you're probably aware that RTD and others have been studying other BRT corridors in this end of the Denver region, including the State Highway 42 corridor and the Highway 7 to the north, but 42 would come down and eventually connect on 96th and then on to the Northwest Parkway and down to US 36. So that potentially could have bus rapid transit service along the eastern edge of the site as well.
Great, thank you. Those are my questions.
Great. Do we have any additional commissioner questions? Commissioner Rice.
Yes, Mr. Baca, one of the public comments that I saw in this recent batch that came through this week asked questions about the open space dedication. And the issue, as I understand the comment was, how was the open space that is being dedicated in this plan selected? Why did we decide to put it where we put it? And how does it fit with the criteria that would typically be used to decide what's optimal in terms of open space dedication?
Yeah, good question. So a few things, and then Jordan chime in as well. But one, we worked very closely actually in sort of Red Tail Ridge 1.0 with the Open Space Board. We had Open Space Board members on site, and we actually had a plan initially that had our open space concentrated around the pond on the northeast side of the site. and then up on the ridge of what we're currently calling Parcel E. And after a lot of tours on the site of the community with the open space board, it really, we kind of realized and got feedback that, you know, the site up on E, which is phenomenal in terms of its views, but it was a storage tech site. So when you're there, you can see this is not greenfield. This is not sort of the natural landscape. There's asphalt on the ground and other things. And then there was a desire for contiguous open space and to connect to not only within Red Tail Ridge, but to connect to adjacent open spaces around it. And so we replaced it. We made it larger, both based on feedback from the community and from the open space board. And we really focused on undeveloped land. And so it became quite natural. In conjunction with that was the feedback from parks and public landscaping, and where we shifted the parks over to be on the western side, which was one, closer to the community. Two, there's some synergies with the school. And it just sort of left this, 88th, which was a goal of the city as well, to remain as a rural feel. And so it was a combination of those factors and that feedback from the open space board and from the community that led to where it is now.
All right, great. Thanks. That really addresses the question I had, and I appreciate that input.
And I noticed a couple other commissioners had Commissioner Howe.
I have a couple of questions for Bill for the traffic and hardscape, if you don't mind, and maybe some overlap with Mr. Bruco. So in Parcel C, when I look at the proposal, it does show the pond with a common open space around it. But when I think it was probably closer to the 361 page, it was at the very end of the traffic report. It showed larger buildings to the northwest of that pond. So I just wanted some clarification as to maybe what is planned around that common open space with that pond. Are there buildings planned for the northwest of that pond or not?
And I'm going to let Jordan do that one.
Sure. Yeah, I could speak to that. So in the conceptual plans that we've designed, and really the land inherently lends itself to really only having buildings just to the west of the pond and south of the pond. It's really not conducive to develop on the northeast corner of the pond. And then that's partly why it's inherently nice to interface as common open space. And then we wanted to maintain a distance and a buffer and green space from Campus Drive and the adjacent open space. So that's why it's also identified so that the buildings then they have to shift and tuck more southeast or southwest and central to the site in that specific sub area.
So less buildings on the west and northwest, more on the southwest. Maybe it sounds like.
And when we're drawing it, it's like three buildings that really could realistically fit in that area.
And then Bill, I just wanted you to I did read a lot of that traffic report, and I just thought maybe a conclusion from you would be nice, because I know there's 2030 projections and 2040 projections. From what I understood, that there are some significant time delays. And what I read, and maybe this is where we start the discussion, what I read is that on the 96th Street via Vara, we're looking at maybe 100-second additional commute at year 2040. And then a little bit less for the 2030. It looks like maybe 57 seconds. That seems to be the biggest delay areas. I just thought maybe you could comment on maybe some conclusions that you gathered from that 2030 and 2040 projection.
Sure. So, and as you saw in the traffic study, we look at existing in 2025, 2030, 2040, and with and without the Red Tail Ridge additional traffic. And then even without the Red Tail traffic, the background traffic, we look at what the projected level of service would be and what mitigations might be needed independent of red tail. And then we look at those same situations again with red tail. And so what you're referring to with that 100-second delay is table 14, page 91 of the traffic study. And it shows that in the year 2040, with red tail in place, there will be some congestion in the intersection of 96th and Northwest Parkway via Vara, that intersection area. And we then say, well, what can we do about that? And so then we analyzed what the mitigation measure might be. And there we looked at, and I think I mentioned last time, the potential to add a third southbound lane from the 96th Street intersection south along the eastern edge of Red Tail Ridge, that having that additional capacity there mitigates that 100-second delay. And so in fact, if you scroll down another page or two to page 92, you'll see table 15, and you can see those same that same intersection, the delay has been mitigated back to level service D by doing that. So that's how we look at what is it in the background, what is it with the site, and then what is it with mitigation measures. So, and you mentioned the timing of things. There's no question most of the projected improvement needs in this traffic study need to be on your radar as a community, regardless of red tail. What red tail does is accelerate the need for them by some time. And if you look at a good way to see that is in the executive summary table E2, it shows with and without the red tail at various intersections and various segments. But you're right, that's the timing of things is accelerated by adding additional traffic, and we tried to identify that. But even then, we tried to identify mitigation measures as well.
Yeah, and I think everyone can understand that the delays will increase over time, no matter whether this project goes forward or not. Then I saw that there was some mitigation for Highway 42, and we thought about expanding some lanes north of that 96th intersection we just talked about. But did we talk about how it may affect Highway 42 a little bit further north? Maybe I'm thinking to the east of downtown Louisville, a little bit closer to the downtown Louisville. Did we go that far with the traffic projections?
We had 9 or 10 intersections in our study area, but we did not go as far north as the intersection of 42 where it curves and goes east. That intersection was outside our study area. The farthest north we had was Dillon and 96th. But and we did talk about the potential need to enhance the 96th Street corridor, both in the background and in the with project scenarios.
Thanks, Bill. That was a good report, by the way. I appreciate all that effort you put into it.
Great, thank you.
Great. Any additional commissioner questions of the applicant at this time? I think we're all eager to, Commissioner Deal.
One more. Just as a point of clarification on that topic, in terms of some of the near-term improvements, obviously like Campus Drive, is that funded with the Metro District dollars? And then how about other near-term improvements, like if 88th needs an additional right turn lane and 96 gets additional lane? How do you determine what's funded through Metro District versus maybe other sources?
Jordan, you want to start and then I'll go?
Sure. So in the Metro District Service Plan, which we will be amending to be very specific to the improvements that will be contemplated under their purview of scope and responsibility, which will go alongside the plat. So that detail will go along with the subdivision improvement agreement and the service plan amendment. So that detail isn't yet here. However, we have estimates of about $90 million worth of improvements, which is all of the on-site roadways that you saw and a series of the recommended off-site elements that are contemplated. And we're doing bond sizing analysis right now to ensure funding for that scope of work. And we could find a way to get you the detail of the exhibit. We sent a proposal that's under review by staff right now, and there's a list of improvements.
Okay, that's sufficient for now. Thank you.
Great, Commissioner Howe.
And then one more question for Jeff, and maybe Jordan, you can chime in on this. One of the things that I think is a big concern for citizens is the flexibility. 20 years is a long time to lock into this development. So I just wanted to get your feedback on what you, whether you have considered a gradual development and approval, not necessarily parcel by parcel, but more in stages. I know that adds a lot of time and effort to your proposal, but whether you've considered that at all.
Well, actually, Jordan, I think you can comment on the desires of having a plan for the whole thing, right?
Well, the project benefits from a comprehensive, holistic view. Like that's really our scope is able to enhance the areas and create a place much more successfully when we're looking at the broader area. So that would be one consideration with our approach. As far as build out, we don't anticipate it being overnight. It's definitely going to take time to do so. Phasing of the improvements will go over, will also dictate how we go through that. I guess I'm not sure I'm following exactly how to address your issue or concern.
And Commissioner Howe, one of the things we've been getting a lot of feedback on this, and one of them early on was actually, well, no, we want to know exactly what's going to be happening in the whole site. And so what you're suggesting, kind of an idea of going piece by piece, I don't think would be very well met in the process, just because there'd be too many question marks of what would be next and what would be next. So it's been pretty consistent along the way that really we need to demonstrate and show what's going to be happening for the entire project, even though you're right, absolutely, it is a long time frame.
All right, thanks, guys.
Commissioner Williams.
So I kind of wanted to address the Northwest Parkway, and there's 3 intersections that are related to the Northwest Parkway. That's the Northwest Parkway and US 36 interchange, the intersection at Northwest Parkway and 96th Street via Barra, and the 96th Street and then the Northwest Parkway at Rock Crest Drive via Barra, AKA the tape drive. So those 3, and I can't remember exactly in the IGA for the Northwest Parkway. I'm assuming there were funds for at least US 36 and Northwest Parkway, but I'm not sure about the other 2 and how they're triggered. I do recall that it had something to do with the connection from Northwest Parkway over the whole mall and connecting through to like 128 or utilizing 128 and then becoming Jefferson Parkway. So I was wondering if you can address that and where these funds are going to end up coming from for these 3 particular intersections and interchange that I mentioned.
Yeah, sure. And Jay Hardy, I might introduce Jay to answer that question.
You bet. Thanks, Jeff, and thank you for the question. We've been working very closely with the Northwest Parkway and with Bill Fox and his team just to identify, what's the timing and what's the need for those. And, the most immediate need are part of the offsite public improvements that are in place that will be done through the Metro District. So you talk specifically about Tape or Rock Crest, that intersection will be redone at the very beginning. Same would be true at 96th. And then as the program from 1.0 to 2.0 reduced, the need for some of the larger improvements really went away. And so the finished product will be a memorandum of understanding between the concessionaire, City and County of Broomfield, Louisville, and the developer about how all those improvements, the timing and the triggers of that. So, Bill, I don't know if there's anything you can add to that related to timing, but in terms of the funding, the short-term elements are accommodated in the Metro District Plan.
Okay, so some comes from the Northwest Parkway when that time comes, right? You are stating that. And then most of it comes from the metro districts that are created at Red Tail Ridge.
It'll be a combination for sure, and those are the conversations that we're having now. I think there was more concern last fall than there is now based on the program and the traffic profile. But yes, it'll be a participatory agreement between all those parties, and that's what we're working on now.
Okay, and does some of that, okay, I understand that some of it triggers based on when that connection happens from Northwest Parkway on to whatever you want to call it, Jefferson Parkway or whatever it's all called now. But what helps trigger when the interchange at like Northwest Parkway and US 36 become an F, level of services becomes an F or a D? Does that help trigger the funds being released in order to improve these particular 3 intersections?
Regarding
I'm going to let you speak to that real quick.
Sure. Regarding
on the 120.
The timing for the interchange improvements, there's no question that we foresee the need for upgrades to that interchange, US 36 and Northwest Parkway over time. What's not clear is how the Northwest Parkway is configured in that same interchange area. And so that's been a bit of a moving target. But just in looking at the background traffic and the background plus Red Tail, we see that interchange under pre-COVID projections would need to be upgraded by the year 2040, and Red Tail Ridge would accelerate that somewhat. So, but I want to just, one of your earlier questions dealt with COVID and pre-COVID and how do we deal with that and how do we account for that? And what I believe is all the projections in this study, which are focused on AM and PM peak hours, are conservatively high. And I believe, and a year ago I wouldn't have said that, but we didn't live through COVID then. And so what we've seen is that the office commuter has figured out how to work like we're doing now by video. And I'm not saying you won't need office space, and I think you won't use office space as intensely. And so what that will do is minimize the peak hour congestion. Not minimize, but reduce the AM and PM peak hour congestion, because that's largely driven by office folks going to and from work. And so if that goes down over time, as we evolve a little bit because of COVID, some of our numbers will be conservative. And so do we need an interchange by 2040? Maybe it's 2045 or later, because of that reason, because it's so peak hour dependent. Go there in the middle of the day, there's no congestion. It's just morning and evening commuting times, and that's largely driven by office workers.
Okay. So I don't even know how to follow up on that. The thing is, if we're talking about the traffic AM PM on a project that we're planning on having office workers, and we are now saying that we don't believe that the pandemic is going to fully hurt office workers coming into the office. They're not going to work from home. I mean, it's just it doesn't quite.
I think that we will still go to the office. I think we will still commute to the office. I just don't think we'll do it 5 days a week, or every employee will do it 5 days a week. It doesn't say we don't need office.
Okay.
I can't wait to get back to my office. I haven't been there in 15 months downtown Denver, but I can't wait to see my employees. I haven't seen them in person in 15 months. But we won't do it as intensely.
Worried that we're going to hit that level service D and F pretty quickly if things recover like we think it will, and in 10 years, well, that's 2035 or 2032 or whatever. But I'm just wondering how this development is going to play into that, and how we tap into those funds and when, and how that gets triggered.
Bill, if I could jump in real quick.
Yeah,
So,
you bet.
you know, that one of the things that if you, and I'm sorry we didn't have you in attendance last week, but it sounds like you looked through the presentation. There was one slide that really focused on the AM and PM traffic. And when we look at what's entitled today, we never even come close to, in terms of this project's contribution to, you know, what ConocoPhillips was at the AM, PM. So I know there's a focus on that, especially related to office. This is a much more distributed plan in terms of how the traffic moves pretty much all the way through the day, instead of, you know, say 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning and 4:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon. So while it will certainly have an impact, I'm not suggesting it won't, but I think it's much less, both from square footage, but also in terms of the way the traffic distributes throughout the day.
So you also think that the uses on the property won't necessarily be the AM, PM. It could vary. There could be other uses that operate at different times.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, if you look, and again, whether it's right or wrong to compare to ConocoPhillips, that situation was pretty much all office, right? So it's going to load in the morning, it's going to offload in the afternoon. This is one that has, you know, less office and has industrial, which is going to come and go throughout the day. So yeah, I think that there is one really good graph in that presentation that really speaks to, even at maximum build out in 2035, in terms of where the traffic hits, and it really is not even close to where ConocoPhillips would be if it was an all office, one campus user, which was what was approved, you know, about 10 years ago.
Right. And if it was the earlier iteration of being Medtronic, that
Correct.
we're talking about this very differently. Okay.
Exactly.
Great. Fair enough. Good to know. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any additional commissioner questions of the applicant at this time? We are going to be moving into public comment here shortly. Just kind of for housekeeping measures, to let people know, there are a number of other items on the agenda for this evening, potentially. If we continue with our discussions of this project, we will not be starting any new agenda items after 9 p.m. Just to let people know how the evening could play out. And then, so as we move into public comment, I'll be working with Lisa on staff to identify and unmute people as their turn comes up. I'll also try to let people know who's next after I call out the first person. Again, we ask when you begin that you state your full name and address. We will be using a timer on screen for 3 minutes. If you can do your best to follow that when you're speaking, that would be greatly appreciated. And I certainly do want to start by acknowledging that we appreciate so many people who joined us for the beginning of this hearing and who have been able to rejoin this evening and are here to speak on it. Lisa, should I just kind of continue as we did last time?
Yeah, I think that worked well. If you want to state their name, I will release them to speak. And then whoever is speaking, you'll also have to unmute on your end. So it kind of takes both of us to get you live. So just FYI on that.
Great, thanks. So the first person on my list is Aaron Lindsay, and the second person will be John Mahaley. If we can begin with Aaron, there we go, unmuted.
Yes.
Great.
Hi, my name is Erin Lindsay. I live at 826 Trail Ridge Drive. Thank you so much for taking time to hear us. I feel like I'm learning so much about the process and how all of this works, and I please ask your patience because I'm not deeply intimate with all of the nitty-gritty details here, but I do have some thoughts and for some consideration here. I was in attendance for the last meeting last year, back when with the 1.0 proposal. I remember the city council was talking about the commuter traffic concerns, and it seemed like the general perspective was that the projections for the expected traffic didn't really seem very realistic, and how there was some concern about how it would be handled. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the traffic changes and the road changes and such, but it seems like the density has only decreased by about 20%. I'm just curious at this point, is the realistic nature of the traffic volume still a concern? And I'm just wondering if this plan could still sufficiently handle that. There's been all this discussion about the LEED gold versus silver standards. I appreciate the attempts to move towards silver. I'm also concerned about relying on what the tenants do in order to get to gold. Why not have the builders go to a gold standard and then also try and encourage the tenants to do their part as well? I'm just wondering if there's anything that can be done there. In terms of the solar demands, I like that the shifts have already taken place and changed, or have shifted a little bit in consideration, even just since last week. I'm wondering, is there anything that can be done to make sure that there are at least, the hookups and the space necessary to ensure that potentially all of the electric demands are being satisfied? But mostly I'm concerned currently. Nothing in the presentations that we've seen so far is enforceable. It's not binding. And the current vision seems a lot better, but I'm just wondering, what can we do to guarantee in an enforceable black and white written down kind of way that all of these interests and goals are actually, there are minimum commitments that are being met. To a broader perspective, is there anything else that can be done to the overall process for approving buildings here in Louisville that can make sure that the city doesn't commit to waivers and exceptions and such without requiring commitments, minimum commitments? Anyway, that's my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And John Mahaley we have next, and on deck would be Tess Welton. John's name just disappeared from my screen.
Yeah, I'm not sure where he went. We'll keep an eye out for him and he can pop back on. But in the meantime, Tess has been unmuted.
Great.
Hi, my name is Tess Weltzine, and I am a student at Fairview High School and resident of Louisville. After learning about the plans of this development, I think action needs to be taken to create a more sustainable way of building. This infrastructure will create a major environmental impact on our town. And as a young person who wants a healthy future, we need to take steps to reduce the effects of infrastructure on wildlife and air. And these developments need to be net zero, and we can't continue to build like climate change doesn't exist. They purchased this piece of land with a lot of money and can afford to commit to net zero infrastructure. We need to be accountable for all future generations and focus on a more sustainable way of building. I'm calling on you to take action for the city of Louisville and future generations that want a clean earth. We can be leaders for Louisville, and there is no reason not to strive for the most sustainable infrastructure possible.
Thank you very much. It is great to hear from students. Much appreciated. I see Tiffany Boyd, and then after Tiffany, RJ Harrington.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tiffany Boyd, and I've lived at 550 Grant Avenue since 1993. I'd like to speak tonight about the missing elements of the Brubical's proposal and the opportunity that we have as a community to do better. Similar to what Tess was just talking about, while many of us realize that there's been a significant time commitment of the Louisville staff and the reviewing of Brubical's application, the elephant in the living room still remains glaring and very unaddressed. The continued threat to all of us, if we continue to rely on fossil fuels, is well documented and steeped in so much science that you can't go a day without hearing about the rising temperatures of our planet. There are many, many examples of net zero building projects here in Colorado, and Brubicol has an opportunity to be a leader in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Precedent aside, regarding silver or gold LEED standards, we are in a climate crisis. Their plans lack leadership and is not considering the general welfare of our citizens and the future generations of our children and our grandchildren. And as a municipality, we have 3 ways that we can encourage and require green building for new construction. We have zoning, we have design standards and guidelines, which were last updated in 1997 and due to be revised this year, and we have building codes. This Red Tail Ridge development is asking to be included as a planned community zone district, and our own city codes state that the purpose of a planned community zone district is to encourage, preserve, and improve the health, safety, and general welfare of the people of the city by encouraging a contemporary land planning principle and coordinated community design. Contemporary land planning principles must include the most sustainable metrics for our times, and Brubicol is asking to build a development in the midst of a climate crisis which relies on fossil fuels, and this does not improve the health, safety, and general welfare of the city. Last week, Keaton Howe, Jeff Moline, Ben Deal all asked representatives from Brubicol at the meeting about more specific metrics on sustainability. Brubicol has filled their Sustainability 2.0 document with aspirations, commitments, goals, instead of metrics that clearly tell the story of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And addressing all these specifics in the PUD phase is too late. Once again, profits, both for the city and for Brubicol, are taking a front seat over the people of our community and our land, air, animal species, and health. There was a lot of discussion about the tax revenue last week over time for our city and the fiscal gains at Red Tail Ridge when it's built out. Now, these metrics were well researched and delivered, but not so with the metrics on greenhouse gas reduction. Brubicol must and can do better. If they have the money to purchase this property, they have the money to be leaders in creating a net zero development. Thank you so much.
And thank you for your participation. Next, I believe we have RJ Harrington, and then after that will be Stephanie Rowe.
RJ, you're unmuted. I'm not sure. You're free to start when you're ready.
Bumping all around on these various tabs. Good evening, neighbors. My name is RJ Harrington, and our family resides at 457 East Raintree Court. I speak tonight with Tess on our children's behalf, as well as all members of their and future generations. I also dare to speak for the voiceless members of our own human species, as well as all other species, and the voice of nature that is never heard. Until too late. On this 2.0 proposal, I reiterate my written comments from last week. I am speaking to the lack of firm enforceable commitments to no new fossil fuel supply infrastructure. Commissioner Deal spoke to this lack of specifics at last week's meeting. As of this meeting, this same lack exists on the city planning page. Last week in writing, I referenced that the science is clear. Our species must eliminate all fossil fuels extraction and combustion now, or we will exceed our allowable carbon budget within this decade to give civilization a 67% chance to limit temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. I asked if we needed to use this public hearing to relitigate facts. Not only does this process not allow that, it is a waste of time. Beyond the troves of data that already exist, there comes a new salient development this week. On Tuesday, the International Energy Agency released a special report that provides the first comprehensive energy sector pathway toward global net zero emissions by 2050. The IEA report, Net Zero by 2050, a roadmap for the global energy system, sets out in detail ahead of COP26 what governments, companies, investors, and citizens need to do to fully decarbonize the energy sector and put emissions on a path in line with the temperature rise of 1.5 degrees C. That means no more investments in fossil fuels from 2021. Faith Birol, the IEA's executive director, one of the world's foremost energy economists, told The Guardian, If governments are serious about climate crisis, there could be no new investments in oil, gas, and coal from this year. As is quoted in numerous news articles about the report, the implications are far-reaching. This is truly a knife into the fossil fuel industry. This is a complete turnaround of the fossil-led IEA from 5 years ago. The applicant has proven its capability to produce lovely slides with, quote, heart and soul, quote. My heart and soul demands that they take their obvious commitment to serious capital expenditures and expand on that commitment to edit the application that is in line with an habitable biosphere for our progeny. Much focus is given to the market and risk by the applicant. The invisible hand of the market has decided. The risk to our biosphere is that it's expendable in service to the market. Jeff mentioned the gas station on South Indiana. Who builds those? May I remind ourselves? Louisville. We just approved a new 7-Eleven gas station. Good on us. Thanks for your time and your service to our community, commissioners.
And thank you for your comments. We have Stephanie Rowe with next up, Jerry McQuee.
Good evening, Stephanie. I believe you wanted to be able to share your screen. Is that correct?
Hi there. Hi. Yes, I do want to share my screen.
All right. Let's see here. 1 second. What we need to do.
You should be able to here in a second, Stephanie. You're a panelist now. Or no, you need to be a host. Meredith, I don't see that I can do that as a co-host.
You should be able to do it just as a panelist.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
There we go. We have your screen share now.
Stephanie, your microphone is turned off.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Oops. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Why is this not playing? Sorry. I have a lot of anxiety about the technology not working here. Okay, so I'm good to go, right?
Yeah, and
I think that is a yes.
yes.
Okay, so I am showing these images tonight because I just needed to push back on the idea that the narrative that is sort of getting put out there these days about this land that we're talking about as being some kind of godforsaken post-industrial wasteland. And that what we need is a real estate investment company to come along and save it. So I just have some visual images here that to show that really it's the opposite. This place is not a post-industrial wasteland. It's full of life. It's a busy place. It's home and hunting ground for countless animals and for native plants. And I think that we even learned yesterday, actually, that there's a bobcat out there, which is pretty cool. The Red Tail Ridge Plan calls for the extermination of up to 5,000 prairie dogs. And if you keep a close eye out here, there's actually a picture coming up of an eagle eating one of those prairie dogs. It was taken, all of these images were taken at the site. This is a keystone species on whom many, many others out there depend. So the reason, and I just want to say I can't see my timer right now, so just please interrupt me if I go too long. But the reason that this place is not the barren, lifeless, post-industrial waste dead zone that it's being painted as is that most of the site has been undisturbed by human activity for most of its history. Storage Tech, which had buildings there from, I think, 1978 to 2010, occupied maybe 1/3 of the 389 acres in question. Wildlife and native plants were there before 1978 and after 2010. And during Storage Tech's time, they would have been on the remaining 2/3 of the site. Wildlife and plants of all kinds have had free reign over the site for the last 11 years and before that, and all evidence suggests that it's thriving. So in other words, just to be clear, Storage Tech is not Chernobyl. And frankly, even if it were Chernobyl, I mean, look at that place these days. It's one of the most biodiverse and thriving habitats on the planet. If the world were rational, or if capitalism were rational, I guess I should say, Red Tail Ridge would simply replace storage tech with 1.6 million square feet on top of the same footprint. The next most rational thing to do would be to hold Red Tail Ridge to the 2.5 million square feet approved for ConocoPhillips and insist on a concentrated site design that allows for at least 200 acres to remain undeveloped. The state of Colorado gives local authorities the responsibility of looking after the interests of the natural world within its jurisdiction. That's in part 1 of the Local Land Use Controlling Enabling Act, and I should hope that everybody keeps that in mind. I guess that's it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and appreciate the visuals as well.
I think it's important.
Moving.
Stop share. There we go.
Thank you. Yeah. Moving next, we have Jerry. And I apologize if I don't have your last name quite right. Is it McKee or McQuee?
Yeah, it's Jerry McQuay, but you wouldn't know it from the way it's spelled. So no problem there. So thank you for your message.
Sorry to interrupt. And Matt Jones is next up.
So I wanted to start, I would say, by thanking the owner and the applicant for coming up with a plan that at least complied with the comprehensive plan, unlike the initial version that was submitted last year. My comments are a little less expansive than some of the other people who are testifying around me. My concern on the general development plan is, while they talk about the goal of having the protecting the view shed, with fairly low profile or clustered buildings, the tallest building on the site is on the highest point on the site, on parcel A, or where you could build it. And my vision, I live at 972 St. Andrews Lane, so I'm just a short walk from the property line of this parcel. And as I look out on it, I envision the taller buildings would be on the lower elevation portions of the property, which is the east end of the parcel, and not up at the highest point, right next to the schools and that. So I was wondering if my request to the Planning Commission is there any latitude we have in recommending that that the applicant modify its height plans to sort of favor taller buildings on the lower elevation portions of the property. That's all I had. So thank you very much.
We thank you very much, Matt Jones. And up next will be Tamar.
Good evening. My name is Matt Jones. I live at 265 Dahlia Drive in Louisville. I'm testifying on my own behalf, although the Boulder County Planning Department professional planners hit it. They nailed it, and they said the place is too big and gave you all sorts of reasons, so it's good to read that. But I'm testifying from my perspective. I'm going to talk about open space, and I'm going to talk about sustainability. It's interesting, this conversation, how it goes, and this positional bargaining. It was 6 million square feet proposed in the original proposal. Now it's down to 3.1. That sounds like a big reduction. But that way of looking at it is backwards. What you should be looking at is what storage tech was, 1.6 million. That's a doubling of that. ConocoPhillips was 2.5. That's 25% more of the 3.1. It's big, it's vast. And what's interesting that I heard in the last hearing is that the ConocoPhillips proposal, what the city approved, had 220 acres of open space. And the proposal now is for 59. It's all backwards. You should have a lot more open space. This is a huge development. It's going to change what Louisville is like, and you should get what you need out of it through your conditions, binding conditions. You should make C3 open for that pond. That pond has very high wildlife value relative to other things on the site, and you don't want to put tall buildings on it. The buffer they put around it is not big enough. There shouldn't be common open space, which is really private open space. It should all be public. And with the Northwest Parkway, you should pull back the development from the highway, from the IGA agreement, the intent of that. Sustainability. These buildings get built and they're there forever. You got to get it right. We got to get it right up front. Last week, I heard about LEED Silver and how hard it was to get to that. Kestrel affordable housing is gold. The building in Lafayette, the county's filling out now, is going to be gold, and that's not on a transportation site. You can do these things by, like, for instance, putting in renewables. I spoke to some people that know this stuff better than I. You could put in the solar and get points. You could do ground source heat points, which is renewable, and get points. You can put in more insulation to get points. Gold is the minimum here. Platinum is what you would like, but gold is the minimum. So I was surprised when I looked at 4 conditions to this permit. This is a huge building permit. The conditions I typically see for a house are like a dozen or 15. You should add binding commitments for having more open space, the C3 area open, no private open space, pull it back from the highway, in addition to what's there, require LEED, solar, and basically make this net zero. Just think about what Louisville people would want you to do. And I guarantee you, having knocked on a lot of doors and answered a lot of phone calls, they would say, net zero, this is Louisville, this is 21, we should do that. Thanks for your time.
And thank you for your time. Tomorrow next up is Jonathan Michael Mahaley.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. In my short 3 minutes, I can't acknowledge all the things that are great and that I agree with.
If we can begin with your name and address.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My name is Tamar Krantz. I live at 691 West Street. And in my 3 short minutes, I can't acknowledge the things that I agree with. So I may come across as negative, but Commissioner Ben Deal said trust, but verify. And that's kind of what I want to focus on in my short comment. First, I want to say that this plan doesn't meet the requirements for a planned community zone district that is in our Louisville Municipal Code. A previous commenter already read those words. So I just want to say that I disagree with the staff analysis on the factor that employment is a general welfare benefit, because I don't think that this is necessarily going to employ the people of the city. And we heard some discussion last week during the discussion on inclusionary housing that a lot of the people who work here don't live here. Overall, I don't think you can promote this general development plan because it doesn't meet the criteria for improving the health, safety, and welfare of the people. The issues regarding loss of open space, traffic, air quality have not been adequately addressed. We understand the climate issue, but I'll also mention that we're in a serious non-attainment area for ozone. And losing our rural gateway is also a burden on the people. This proposal does not represent a coordinated community design. It can't even be evaluated, in my opinion, with so much flexibility. I might sound negative, but I feel like the developers holding hostage smart design principles just to get more height and density. On clustering, I hope you'll require a revision in the language in the agreement so that height waivers require additional public open space and cannot create an increase in the overall FAR. I also hope that you will change the agreement to take out that fencing is allowed if you do allow an exchange for private open space. It does say that in the agreement. I know that was discussed last week. And there is wording that I think you need to add wording. If you're going to allow parking lots to not count in the FAR, you need wording that says that impervious surface area will be increased by the same amount that the parking garage area is decreased. And finally, I just want to say about something that Rob mentioned last week, was that the only 2 parts of this proposal that are binding are the agreement and what's in the general development plan. So we're talking about a lot of great things with sustainability and traffic demand management, but make it a condition of approval that the final traffic demand management plan and a final sustainability document is referenced in the PCDZ agreement, and that they include hard commitments. Have you read the fine print in the Planned Community Zone District Agreement? They are drafts, and they are to be implemented if commercially feasible. That guarantees nothing. We need conditions that will make sure that the public welfare benefits will outweigh the public burdens. And the same goes with the phasing plan. It is also put off to a later phase. I love the stormwater management ideas. I love the idea of no fossil infrastructure for offices. But once again, let's just trust but verify. I really thank you for your time and considering my comment. I hope that you will put this off, let them come back with some hard commitments. This is too general and too flexible to even be a coordinated community design. I hope you'll wait a little bit longer and have some patience. Thanks for taking my comment.
Thank you. Jonathan Michael Mahaley with next up, Isaac Sendros.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Second try. So my name is John Mahaley. I'm at 1018 Arapahoe Circle, and I'd like to thank everyone here in the commission for seriously reviewing everything and paying close attention to detail. And thank you for hearing my comment. So I'd like to. A lot of what I'm about to say has been said, but it's worth revisiting and pointing out some details. I'd like to ask generally, why are we making an amendment to the GDP to increase the size of development and add a lot more commercial space when we have such a hard time currently filling the vacant space that we currently have, especially along McCaslin Boulevard? Does this change to build more commercial space really benefit us? I certainly understand the desire and agree with the push to get more tax revenue. And it definitely sounds nice, the numbers that are in the packet, but that assumes 100% new occupancy. And from what I've seen, there hasn't been any evidence presented that will actually make us think that that's actually attainable. Even when the economy was great, like before the pandemic, we still had significant vacant properties in town. And I know we're trying, but struggling to fill those properties. And that was before we had a roaring work from home movement, which has been acknowledged. So again, how can we have any confidence that we'd actually achieve the suggested benefits? Now, if the developer had come to the table with a proposal and Medtronic locked in as the anchor tenant, I'd feel better about what the point I just made, but everything so far is speculative. And in their own admission is fairly optimistic. So the benefit seems to be very speculative at this point. And aside from the environmental impact, which has been commented on heavily, the other thing that's not speculative is our burden to maintain that property once it is developed. So based on that, I really question the benefit of moving forward with the proposal as is. Furthermore, I'd like to add to the voice of concern that the applicant acknowledged that many of the things that we deem as favorable in the proposal are goals but not commitments, and there's a real lack of enforceable provisions that will make sure that what we see as favorable with this development will actually become reality once it's developed over a very long development time. So with that, I thank you for your attention and thank you for hearing my comment.
So it looks like Chair Bronice is not on the screen right now. So I don't know if that's okay.
Yes, the old unmute button. Isaac Sendros is up next, and Jennifer Singer-Rupp will be after.
Hi, this is Isaac Sendros. I'm CEO of Avista Adventist Hospital, 100 Health Park Drive here in Louisville. So Avista is Louisville's largest employer. We'd like to show our support of this project. One of the issues that Avista has been challenged with throughout the years has been access off of Highway 36 as well as the Northwest Parkway. Now that school has opened back up, this has happened to me several times over the last few weeks. If you are arriving to the hospital at a certain time, it will take you over 20 minutes to travel half a mile. And this occurs twice a day, 5 days a week. The completion of Campus Drive and Tape Drive will positively impact this community by providing patients, EMS, as well as parents better access to schools as well as their medical care. We've shared this development with our employees, and the overall sentiment with the employees and physicians, and the overall sentiment has been excitement for what this development would do for this community, as well as increased access to Avista. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Jennifer Singer-Rupp with J.H. Cooperman after.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, my name is Jennifer Singer-Rupp. I live at 466 Muirfield Circle in Louisville. I first would just like to thank the Planning Commission for really your tireless volunteer commitment to this community, for all the good questions you've posed, for your earnestness and seriousness in taking really the time to evaluate these Red Tail Ridge proposals. So thank you. I've been a Louisville resident on and off for over 40 years. I grew up in Louisville and was a student in the first grade class at Coal Creek Elementary School. My dad's first job out of college was at Storage Tech, and my husband also worked at Storage Tech. When this property was zoned for commercial and light industrial uses in 1978, the decision was based on Storage Tech's plan for a single user corporate campus. Storage Tech provided a lot of jobs to the local community. When the square footage was approved for the site in 2010 and was increased, the decision was based on ConocoPhillips's plan for a single user corporate campus. But now Brew Coal is proposing a sprawling development where parcels will be subdivided and sold to different multiple owners or leased. This is not what Louisville had in mind in 1978 or in 2010. With the latest Red Tail Ridge ideas, there are also no committed commercial or industrial partners. They're proposing a multi-corporate industrial innovation campus. That's what I heard at the last meeting, at least, with no zero committed companies. You know, today, Jeff McCall was saying, we don't know who will be out there. So there's no real substantial committed partners in this. And Jeff Balco said it himself, that he was guessing and taking bets. That's how he described it. You know, another aspect of this is driving in from Denver. This parcel of land is the first vista of fields and the mountains that we see. And what a greeting it is for us. It always brings a smile to me. And it just makes me take a deep breath in and relax and know that I'm home. This piece of land is Louisville's as well as Boulder County's flagship plot of land. So I've seen no discussions or considerations or adjustments made on the part of the developers to take this into consideration. One person talked about it before, with buildings being put down further or on top of the hills instead of down further. And filling it with a sea of asphalt and office space without committed corporate partners would be short-sighted and devastating to the community and future generations. Wildlife has reclaimed this property that has sat vacant for over 10 years. The land was also categorized as rural in Louisville's comprehensive plan. And we still only have 40 acres of open space. So the open space should be greatly increased, and any open space should be officially dedicated to the city of Louisville or bought by the city of Louisville or Boulder County. This decision will affect Louisville for years, for decades, and for generations to come. I urge our representatives to represent Louisville citizens and make this decision with great foresight. The last proposal at least had Medtronic as a partner, so I felt more comfortable. But the intent of this space was always as a single-use corporate campus. We need to get this right with our flagship piece of land for future generations. And as it stands, the plans are too open and broad with too much space for interpretation and leeway with no committed partners. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks.
We thank you for your comments. J.H. Cooperman with, after that, we Cindy Larson.
Hello?
Yep, go ahead.
This is Josh Cooperman. I live at 216 Griffith Street in Louisville. I submitted some written comments, but I'd like to emphasize some of the points that I make in those written comments. And I'd like to first say that I'm not opposed to development at the Phillips 66 Rural Special District, but I am strongly opposed to the current proposed development there. I'd like to make a few points. My first point, I'm going to echo a lot of previous speakers, is that this development is simply not warranted at this time. We do not need more industrial office and retail space in Louisville. There are lots of empty buildings in Louisville, many of them predating the pandemic. Moreover, there are plenty of plots available along Centennial Parkway and at the CTC. I think it is totally wasteful to develop open land or even redevelop open land when there is plenty of space available in Louisville. Secondly, although the news proposal might meet the technicalities of the comprehensive plan, I believe it is not consistent with a vision statement of the comprehensive plan, which states that Louisville will manage its continued growth by blending a forward-thinking outlook with a small town atmosphere. An isolated corporate campus is not forward-thinking. Such unsustainable development now blots a lot of this country. We do not need that in Louisville. Nowhere needs that anymore. Third, I would like to reiterate a comment made from Boulder County, and which was discussed a little bit last time. Although it was said that, you know, big box stores and strip malls would not go into this development, Boulder County pointed out that the proposal is sufficiently vague that that could be allowed, and I think that would be totally alarming. All right. Next, I'd like to say that I think that the sustainability commitments of the developer are inadequate and not in agreement with either the comprehensive plan or the sustainability action plan of Louisville. Specifically in the sustainability action plan, there's an objective to reduce greenhouse gases. I cannot imagine how this development would meet that objective in its current form. I would also, as other people have said, you know, the commitments in the developer's sustainability goals and approach are not binding, or at least not strongly enough binding. Indeed, even the LEED certification for silver, in their very document, it is conflicting whether or not they will actually be required to ask for that of their buildings. All right. Finally, I'd also like to say that I think the footprint of this development is way too big and that it should be more open space. Again, in the comprehensive plan and sustainability action plan, there are directives to protect ecological diversity and health. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Cindy Larson.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi, my name is Cindy Bedell and I'm at 662 West Villa Street in Lewis. And I want to say, I encourage you to vote no on this GDP amendment application to allow 3.1 million square feet of gross floor area. And here are my reasons. The current ConocoPhillips GDP allows 2.5 million, and this is already very generous increase from Storage Tech's 1.6 million square feet built environment. This parcel is Louisville's last opportunity to preserve our Southeast Gateway viewshed and retain the livable small town feel at this entrance to the city. Small town feel is one of the core community values in our comprehensive plan. We can have a reasonably sized commercial, industrial, and retail development on this parcel while still retaining more green space, wildlife habitat, and buffer from Broomfield. One way to accomplish this would be to recommend no more than 2.5 million square feet allowed in the current GDP and recommend more open space on the parcel. Section 17.28.080 of the Louisville Municipal Code gives Planning Commission the specific authority to recommend the requirement of additional open space in a development. The traffic projections at over 20,100 more vehicles a day are still too high for this development. Adding this many vehicles to Louisville streets and the surrounding areas will directly decrease the quality of life for Louisville residents. There is nothing that decreases quality of life more than sitting in traffic, waiting through several street light cycles due to decrease in LOS due to a new development that is too big and creates too much traffic. Also, a lot of this traffic will be near the Monarch campus, putting pedestrian and bike riding children and youth in more traffic danger. I don't believe that the benefit of extending Campus Drive will offset the negative impacts of all the additional traffic predicted from Red Tail Ridge. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Great, thank you for your comments. Well, Lisa, I do not see any additional hands raised at this time. Can you confirm?
It's like we just had another member of the public, a couple more actually raised hands. So Carlos and then an interpreter.
I think, thank you for raising your hands at this point. I think maybe we'll take a quick break right now. We'll come back with the remainder of public comment. So if we can take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back with additional public comment.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Okay, looks like we have the commission back here. Thank you all for our tight timing on all of this. So I know we're working with somebody who is a sign language interpreter this evening, and
Yeah. So
yes.
Dan, you'll need to, or person identified as interpreter will need
Yeah,
to.
that's right. Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So these comments are from Michiko Christensen. She lives at 543 Adams Avenue in Louisville. Let me pull up her comments here. She says, hello, commissioners. I was looking over the developer's plan for Red Tail Ridge and the map of Louisville and Boulder. And I was struck by the huge difference between the size of the city and the amount of open space. It's very concerning. The area of Louisville is about 8 square miles, which converts to just over 5,000 acres. And open space takes up about 1,300 acres. It seems like we could do better. It is vital for Red Tail Ridge to be converted to a conservation or open space use for the city. When the city of Louisville runs out of open space, we will become just like the cities of Denver, Westminster, Thornton, or other communities in the Denver metro area who are forced to travel to different locations to enjoy and utilize open space and land in Colorado. The city of Boulder is a classic example of a circular city. The main hub is in the middle, surrounded by about 45,000 acres of open space in the north, south, east, and west parts of the city. This is a very smart approach to city planning, and they see a financial benefit from the protection of those lands as well. Please reject the Red Tail Ridge plans in honor of preserving our land and protecting the city of Louisville's natural environment. Thank you. That's it.
Great. Well, thank you very much. At this time, I see Carlos Hernandez. Please unmute him.
Good evening. So Commission, thanks again for doing all this. I was thinking about how long it's been since you've done this in Zoom, and you all are a big social group of people, and I know this is so challenging to do this via Zoom. So I also know you don't get paid for this. You're citizen volunteers, and that says a lot about your character. You're one of probably the more notable planning commissions that ever had to do this work. So I just wanted to say thanks. I just have a few comments. I owned a company with Bill Fox, and I was approached by Brubaco 2 years ago to help with the traffic study and the TDM plan. And I told them no, because I like going to street fair. I like being out in the community. I don't like to get a kind of, sometimes how you feel, maybe on the other side of these things. But as time went on and I got to know them more and they asked me more about the project, I got to learn about them as people. And they're not developers, they're people. They're people who live in this community, and they have students who go to these schools. And so I agreed to get involved with the project. So I no longer have a role in this project. I no longer own a company with it. So I think that's important to state for the record. But I want to let you know that I still approve of the project, and I think it's fabulous. But I'm kind of surprised at what I heard tonight, because out of all the conversations, the one word that wasn't brought up was equity. And my story of how I got to where I am is because Louisville was equitable to me. And this site has jobs, and it has opportunity for a wide range of jobs. And everybody who testified tonight told us how long they've owned their house, which makes them millionaires at this point. They have jobs or they're retired, and they're not looking for a job. Now, I look at my son, who's an 8th grader, going to be at Monarch next year, and I think about where he's going to work. And I want you to think about that, because we've oversampled with this input tonight people who are affluent, who have a job, and who are well off. And your job is to listen to our staff, who are amazing. They are the trained planners. They have certifications. They've dedicated their life to planning. Commissioner Rice, you said it last time. It's a great staff report. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't listen to it. In the face of racial equity, in the face of thinking about people beyond ourselves, we need to think beyond open space. If we can't get beyond open space in this community, we have a long way to go to achieve racial equity and inclusion. This site will bring jobs that are needed. Finally, you heard from Tess earlier. Tess goes to school in Fairview, in Boulder. She lives in Louisville. We live in a region. We share jobs, we share schools. Just because Louisville residents may not exclusively work on that site does not make it wrong. Think about the next Carlos Hernandez, who's in school right now that's in the STEM program that's going to be looking for a job. And think about him when you approve this site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And because we are in a Zoom meeting, I see Tamara, you have your hand raised. I don't know, typically we would kind of check in if we were in a room together and see if you intended to have your hand raised at this point in time. You have used your time for public comment, so.
Yeah, I was just going to let my son talk.
Sure, yeah, we would welcome that.
Go ahead, Isaac.
Okay, hi, my name is Isaac Putney, and I'm a student who goes to Louisville Middle School.
Sorry, Isaac, our official procedure, if you would give us the address of where you live too.
I live at 691 West Street, Louisville, Colorado.
Thank you, go ahead.
I'm an LMS student, and I will go to Monarch in 2 years. And I just don't want to have to be next to a giant construction site. I mean, I don't like the dust, I don't like the pollution, and I definitely don't want the noise. This world needs more open space and less buildings. Thanks for taking my comment.
Certainly, thank you for sharing it. At this time, I do not see any additional hands raised. Again, if you...
I concur, no hands raised at this time.
Okay. If you're on the call with computer, there's the hand raise button and the *9 button if you are the, well, I guess we've lost our phone participant. Seeing then I would request a motion to enter into the public record the 3 additional addendum that were provided to us.
So moved. I would so move, Chair Brown Eyes.
Thank you very much. We'll take Jeff as a second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? No opposition. Thank you. With that, then we will close the public comment period and open it up to a staff summation. Actually, we have 2 different orders. Lisa, did you want to clarify if we want to go now applicant response and closing statement? Yes.
Yeah, I'll defer to Director Zucchero on that one since this one's his case.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine. If you want to defer to the applicant to make their closing statement, and then staff can make a closing statement after that, that would be fine.
Okay, great. Then if we can have the applicant response and closing statement.
Thank you, Chairman Brown Eyes. And real quickly, I'd actually like to call Josh Radoff forward. If you could make a couple comments, Josh, and then I'll come in on the tail end of your comments.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Commissioner Brown Eyes, is that all right?
Yes, please, go ahead. Yeah.
Wasn't sure if anyone else was speaking. Yeah, I just, again, appreciate all of the comments that were raised, many of the comments that were raised. One is, I think, I want to address 2 topics. One is LEED and the other is net zero energy. And with regard to LEED, we have developed a scorecard that sort of shows our path to silver. We would be happy to share that with the commission, with city staff, workshop that with city staff. I think our intent is to be transparent. We're not trying to sandbag, and I think we could just, our goal and Commissioner Williams, if you're still there, I finally sort of thought of better answers to your original questions. But I think what we don't want to do is just sort of use LEED as a placeholder for things that that we don't think are the highest value with regard to sustainability. So again, we think the LEED Silver approach is appropriate. We'd be happy to workshop with city staff to have them sort of buy into that approach. And, I think our intent is to focus on the things that are specific things with regard to sustainability that will have the most value. So the second thing is, there were a number of discussions or questions or comments around net zero energy buildings. And, what I hear is that people want net zero energy buildings. I would say we want net zero energy buildings too. I think in our one of our initial drafts, we had indicated that we believe that all of the things that we are doing are effectively the constituents of what the current definition or the evolving definition of net zero energy buildings are. That being efficient buildings, electric buildings, which is the concession or the that we made earlier today, buildings that have on-site renewable energy, and really it's sort of a matter of degree, but we think, and we are sort of heading in the direction, and our intent is to sort of facilitate the transition to a zero carbon economy, supporting electric vehicle charging as a component of that as well. A big piece that's missing that keeps us from committing to something like net zero energy building is our ability to work with some of the mechanisms like community solar gardens, because we just don't know the extent to which availability is going to be there. But I just want to sort of point out, like, people want net zero energy buildings, and they see and they're sort of expressing concern about greenhouse gas emissions and climate. We are on the same page exactly, and we think what we are doing is, again, like all the constituent elements. So I think the specifics are there, particular with the added commitments tonight, as opposed to just goals. And that's something that we're going to continue to work towards. So again, no real conflict there, and I don't want to sort of give the impression, most of all, that somehow our approach to this development is somehow not consistent with the goals of climate mitigation or net zero energy. So thank you for allowing me to make that comment.
And thank you, Josh. I'll just have a quick comment, and we'll keep the process moving here. But first, we really appreciate the passion in the community, and we've heard that kind of throughout this process, and really absorbed a lot of that feedback, and what's led to a lot of our changes here that you see in front of you now. But I want to acknowledge, a few people have made this comment, but we certainly want to make it as well. That Planning Commission, this was a lot for you to get through. You've spent a lot of time reviewing this proposal, and we just really appreciate your attention and focus on this. So thank you for that. City staff, you've also worked very hard, and we just want to acknowledge you and thank you as well. Hopefully, commissioners, you've seen that this is a reimagined concept. This is very different than what we were in front of you with in the past. And we've listened, and we've made significant changes, and we feel like very positive changes. And this plan, the scale, the alignment with the comprehensive plan, it fits. And we're meeting and we're exceeding city standards with this plan. And as proposed, these are leading edge sustainability commitments for a master plan community. And that's where we want to be, and that's where the community wants us to be. And so the goal for all of this is that hopefully this is something that you, Planning Commission, and the entire community will be proud of being a part of, and proud of being a part of creating. And so tonight, we just want to thank you, and we want to ask for your endorsement of this plan. So thank you very much. And with that, Chairman Brown, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. We have commissioner questions of the applicant at this time. Seeing none, we'll ask for a staff summation.
Good evening, Chair Bryan, members of the commission. I'll be very brief. There was a lot of talk about the traffic demand management sustainability goals. I just wanted to point out one thing. In the PCZD zoning agreement, there are two sections. I just want to make sure everybody's aware, 3.5 and 3.6 of that agreement, that address both of those commitments from the applicant. So I would, if anybody wants more information on how that is drafted currently in the proposal, I would point you to sections 3.5 and 3.6. Other than that, I will just reiterate that staff is recommending approval We do have 4 conditions on really clarifications on the plan and some public works technical items that need to be addressed before a city council hearing. And I'm happy to answer any questions or go over any of the conditions if there are questions, but staff has no further comments.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions of staff? Commissioner Moline? You are muted right now. Yeah, no, still happens to the best of us, doesn't it?
Oh gosh, I'm sorry. So I have a couple questions, Rob. Thanks for clarifications just now. One of the things that I'm curious about was this notion of open space, public open space, and common open space. And I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on the fact that the city's open space advisory board and city open space staff are comfortable with the current outlines of what would be publicly dedicated and then what would be retained by the in land that would be retained by the applicant and would be designated as common open space but not owned by the open space. I'm wondering if you could just clarify that a little bit.
Sure. So the Open Space Board and the Parks and Public Landscaping Board both reviewed the public land dedication proposal that you're seeing this evening. So those on the maps, those are the kind of the dark green and the light green areas for the parks and the open space. And we did talk with both of those boards about this the clustering concept. And how that the intent would be to provide more private open space. It wasn't as developed as it was now, so they did not see the exact lines on the map, which are the crosshatch green lines that you are all seeing, but they did vote to endorse the public land dedication portion of the project. We explained the clustering and the private open space concept. My recollection was that was met with positive comment as well during that review.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, would you say that from a city staff perspective, there's value in that common open space, even though it's not publicly owned and have to be maintained by the city? I mean, is that something that the cities would be in the city staff perspective on that?
Sure. Yeah. Let me try to address that. So what we're contemplating and what's actually in the PCZD agreement is it's contemplating as a future process. So when they come in for PUD for development specifically on parcel A or C3, if they are going to build over 3 stories, then they would have to receive a waiver. So there's certain sections of the PUD code, which you're probably aware of, that would require them to provide more open space. One of those is this common open space concept within our code, and it says it can be private or public. And there's a list of reasons why the city could require more open space. As to get to your question on, I think, the value of it, as staff worked with the applicant to develop this concept, one of our requests and comments to the applicant was to make it contiguous to the existing open space, because that would, in our minds, provide the most value from a habitat standpoint, as well as from just a community amenity standpoint of having that contiguousness. If you look in the development agreement as well, it talks about what can be in that common open space. It says it has to be maintained primarily with native and natural vegetation, but there could be limited improvements, which include easements, detention water quality ponds, signage, trails, benches, stormwater improvements, limited landscaping, irrigation, fencing, landscape wells, and then there's some other amenities for like picnic areas.
Okay.
But again, the intent, I think, is that it's contiguous both to the parcel A open spaces, it's contiguous to the parcel F open spaces, but it is across campus. So there is a major road between. But the idea is that it is natural vegetation, native vegetation is how it would be maintained. But yes, we felt that private access I think it could be either public or private, but the applicant's request is private common open space. And again, the code contemplates it could be either.
Okay. I have two more questions. Thank you, Rob. That was very helpful. We heard from a number of people in the community some concerns about, we already have vacant office space. We already have vacant space available. I think what I'm hearing from the applicant is that they would be providing something that isn't in the city at this point. I believe that's sort of what I'm hearing from the applicant. I'm wondering from a staff perspective, how would you, and I apologize for putting you on the spot here, but just how do we respond to those comments about, we've got this vacant space in the city? Why would we want to improve something where we're generating more space? So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So my first thought in that is that we did ask the applicant to provide a market a market study. So that shows, and so this is a long-term project too. We're looking at probably a 20-year or maybe even more build out. But we're contemplating maybe 20 years. That's, I think, what the market study looks at. And so they did have a professional firm do that, and they show, they really look at the whole Denver region as well as the US 36 corridor. And, using their professional analysis, they look at absorption rates over time based on sector. So again, this does, it models, they're looking at a certain amount of industrial and office, very little commercial retail. That market's pretty soft right now, but they do suggest that it could be absorbed perhaps in a 20-year time period. And then as far as our vacancies, on McCaslin, we certainly have, a fair amount of retail vacancy right now. While this property could theoretically build quite a bit of retail, the way the zoning is set up, there are areas specifically slated for industrial and office. So you could have supportive retail, but you couldn't have primarily retail. Now, there are sections of this plan where you could have primarily retail. So it's kind of a mix of all of that. So, I think it is, geographically, it's very different from McCaslin. It would probably have its own identity and so forth. And then my last thought on your question, I think, is the tech center, the Colorado Tech Center, is mostly built out at this point. And it took decades to build out as well. But it is, there are very few vacant properties still to develop within that tech park.
Okay. Thanks. That's all I have right now. Thanks so much, Rob.
Thank you very much. Any additional commissioner questions for staff before Commissioner Howe?
Hi, Rob. I've run my own numbers, but I always like to get a second opinion on those to clarify and confirm. So I see the 2021, I'm looking at the revenue projected as I look at the benefits of this project. And I'm looking at the 80% occupancy level. And when I look at the city's total revenue expected for 2021, it's about $56.5 million. The estimated revenue at 80% tenancy is $2 million. Am I correct in assuming that it's about it would be a 3.5% increase?
Yes, that sounds correct. Yeah. So the overall city budget is about 56 million, or at least it is in 2021.
Okay.
And that would be, I think, about 3%.
All right. I just wanted to make sure my math with you. Thanks. That was it.
Great. Any additional commissioner questions of staff before we close public comment? Commissioner Williams.
One quick question. This is for Rob. So what is the net revenue that ConocoPhillips had in their plan?
So,
sorry to put you on a spot.
No, that's okay. Right. So with this new application, we didn't model the ConocoPhillips plan, but in the application last year we did. And so we did run the fiscal model for that application, and I could pull that up, but it will take me probably a couple of minutes to just get to that file.
Okay. It would me too, and I forgot that it was in there. But
yeah, and this wasn't in the current packet materials.
Right.
This was in last year's information.
Right.
And let me just get to one of those hearings here.
So maybe someone else can ask a question while you look.
Do we have any additional? I think this may be it, actually. I guess this explains why they have that little music that plays during Jeopardy.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to start deliberating as well, I can just raise my hand once I found it.
Okay.
Okay.
Why don't we go ahead then? So we'll now move into Planning Commission deliberations, and as the information is available, we'll try to answer that question for Commissioner Williams. So comments and deliberations amongst planning commissioners. Do we have anybody who's interested in sharing their current thoughts on the proposal? Commissioner Moline, thank you for volunteering.
Yeah, just I wanted to see if anybody else wanted to step in, but I'll offer some kind of initial observations and thoughts, and then I'll be interested to hear what other commissioners have to say. And one thing I think we could do is, in terms of some of the sustainability commitments that we've heard tonight, I think we could ask to make those commitments that we've heard become commitments of record for this docket, for this item. So that would be one way to kind of address that concern that we've heard about there being lots of goals, and how do we make sure that those become items of record. And I'm wondering if we had a condition that would ask that, or maybe one isn't required, we can check with staff. So that's just one thing I wanted to note. And then before I speak here just a little bit, and then the other thing felt like I needed to do is I just wanted to acknowledge that the plan that we've seen now, so the 2.0, I really feel like it's been improved by the participation of the applicant, by the staff, and most certainly by the public as well. So I really feel like what we're looking at is something different. And so I wanted to offer that kind of perspective. And then before I provide some kind of historical context, I also just wanted to say that, like, in terms of open space, I appreciated some of the last comments we heard about, where have we been in Louisville with open space? And I guess one of the things that at least I think of at some point is that every place that was in Louisville has looked like the, sort of the natural areas that we see at Red Tail Ridge before. All of our neighborhoods, the town, has been built on that. And so I just want us to recall that, and for some of us who've lived here for a while, neighborhoods across the street didn't exist. And so in many places, there've been wildlife, there's been open fields, there's been wetlands, and a lot of those have now been converted into the neighborhoods that we now live in. We live in a built environment, and it's a place that still has wildlife, I would note. We had a bear rumble through our yard here in Louisville several years ago. So I don't know that there needs to be this dichotomy of it's either open space or it's built. I worry when we come to those kinds of conclusions. And I guess in terms of open space as well, I appreciate the recommendation of OSAB about this parcel. And I feel like the applicant has made an effort to protect some of the least impacted parts of the property with their open space designation, and concentrating the development on parts of the property that were disturbed by the prior building and excuse me, and the reclamation of those. So then the other observation and context I would just mention is that the city cast the first die on this property in 1978 when it flagpole annexed this site down 96th Street and used the tech center to get here, and then left 2 miles of unincorporated land between it and the downtown. And the reason I'm saying that is because I can look over at my 1980 USGS wall map of Boulder County, and that's exactly the moment in time that it captures this. And so that's the action that brought storage tech into the town limits, but it left it disconnected from the rest of the town. And so now this parcel has really sort of become this car dependent place from the start. It's even though we've had subsequent development and open space acquisitions, the area is still isolated from the town's urban centers. But at least we now have gotten this parcel adjacent to the campus settings of the Monarch High School and the Avista Adventist Hospital through some subsequent ownership changes. And then I recall that we had the ConocoPhillips approvals in the town, and we had hopes of seeing a corporate campus on the site. And of course, there'd been other proposals for the property through the years once storage tech left. So I just again want us to remember that contextual legacy, and that's what we're living. That's what we're living, and that's what we're dealing with. So fast forward to 2013, I was on the planning commission when we approved the comp plan at that time, and that's when this was designated as a rural special district, and that's what we've been planning for. And again, as in the comments I made about Red Tail 1.0, I didn't feel like it was consistent with the comp plan, and I explained my reasons then. And now on paper, I think 2.0 is much more consistent with it. When you view it through the comp plan's kind of property specific perspective, that framework specific land use guidelines for the area. So there's all that. And then I also empathize with some of the comments that we've heard about times have changed. We know this development is going to exacerbate the jobs and housing imbalance in the county, which will make it even harder for people to afford housing here. And we heard some of that from some of these last comments that we heard from the public. And that's challenging as well. And the trips from this development are going to contribute to the area's traffic. And even though the development, of course, provides some of that infrastructure, the new roads, watercress, that are going to improve vehicular transportation in the area and mitigate some of those traffic impacts. But for me, it's those impacts, the job housing imbalance, the traffic, and the kind of environmental sustainability, climate impacts that continue to trouble me. And I guess what I'm struggling a bit with is that on paper, the development is meeting the kind of goals and framework we have for the site, but what I'm struggling with is the development itself meeting some of those broader kind of sustainability environmental goals that are cited generally in our comp plan. So that's kind of where I'm sort of conflicted at this point. I do also share concerns that, what kind of a message do we send to landowners and residents when they meet the kind of general site requirements that we spell out in our planning documents, but then we have a hard time getting to the finish line on some of these things. So that's kind of where I'm at, and thanks for indulging me and letting me make these comments. So look forward to hearing from the rest of you.
Thank you very much for leading off with that. I see Director Zucchero, you have some information perhaps?
Yes, I did. So I went back to the June 25th Planning Commission staff report from last year to get the fiscal model for the ConocoPhillips development. So we ran our current fiscal model based on those land uses, and it showed a net fiscal impact over a 20-year period of 30.4 million, which is an average annual net impact of 1.5 $5 million. So that's positive net impact.
Does that answer your question, Mr.
Yeah.
Williams? Yeah.
Okay.
All right, then.
Thank you.
So I will now close the public hearing, and the planning commissioners will continue to deliberate and discuss on the evidence presented. During deliberations, no further public comment or other testimony or evidence will be received. If we can continue with our deliberations. Commissioner Deal.
Sure. Tagging along Commissioner Moline. Yeah, I think the presentation and the evolution of Red Tail is in the right direction. Clearly agree with staff. You know, it meets the density requirements for this special rural district. So appreciate the applicant, you know, basically proposing in line with the comprehensive plan there. With regards to open space, they've dedicated the minimum required and actually exceeded that. I hear all of the residents that would like the whole property to be open space. I would probably be for that if we were to vote on such a thing. Obviously, that comes with a pretty significant price tag. This is a private property owner, and they have obviously the right to develop the property. So I think we all knew as a town that this was going to be developed. The comprehensive plan lays out what the requirements are, you know, the maximum density, et cetera. The two things, and you know, Commissioner Moline, in terms of sustainability, and obviously everybody's heard my comments on this. I think there's no question that the sustainability plan feels a little bit like an afterthought or a bolt-on in terms of, you know, the genesis of this plan. And I know these guys have been at it for quite a while, but you know, I would recommend, you know, a deep dive and rethinking of sustainability on this development. And that should involve obviously staff, as well as potentially the Louisville Sustainability Advisory Board, I think is what it's called. You know, the experts in this, as I had mentioned before, you know, as you proceed to city council, the sustainability issue will continue to be there. It'll probably be even a higher priority. So, you know, it's certainly an issue for me in terms of approving this, and it will be going forward as well. And then the other challenge I have, which, you know, I had mentioned last week, you know, the applicants referred to this GDP amendment as a, you know, a guideline or a roadmap to how they see this development proceeding. And the comprehensive plan is very clear about the maximum 3 stories, with an exception, which would allow additional stories, you know, by, you know, making sure we are clustered and located out of the public view shed. In some of the 3D video renderings of the location of these 90-foot buildings, just, you know, obviously we're not at the phase of approving that, but I can just tell you, for me, that's going to be in the public view shed. So for the applicant to move forward and think, well, we got the GDP amendment approved, and this was the plan, this was the roadmap, you guys saw, you know, these 90-foot buildings. That's why I've been uncomfortable with having in the GDP amendment a table that says parcel A, 5 stories, 90 feet. You know, and of course, you know, staff has added this note, nothing in this GDP amendment approves any height waivers. Well, I mean, in my opinion, we shouldn't put 90 feet, 5 stories even in the GDP amendment, but you know, I'm not sure exactly what's customary there, but I just want the message to be heard, obviously to the applicant, to the city, and then obviously to city council, that to me, early drafts do not show that those buildings are clustered enough, buffered enough, and are not out of the view shed. So those are kind of my 2 main reasons for, you know, leaning against the amendment as is.
Thank you, Commissioner Deal. Commissioner Howe.
Thanks, Commissioner Brown Eyes. And I think I'm on the same page as the previous 2 commissioners, Commissioner Deal and Moline. Commissioner Moline, I always respect and like to hear your responses. You have a much more better connection to some of those emotions that I have. First, obviously, I think a thank you should go out to Brew Buckle for taking the time to provide. I think what I saw is a transparent discussion and efforts to listen and work with the desires of the city and the citizens, even since our last meeting. And I think that there are a lot of improvements since Red Tail 1, as Commissioner Deal said. Thanks to Director Zaccaro and the planning group for your time and dedication. I know that this is taking a lot of time, but I think it's worth it, and it's paying off. And then thank you to the Louisville citizens. This has taken a lot of patience, and I appreciate your guidance and feedback that you're giving me through your emails and conversations, because it helps me to get more well-rounded in a discussion. I have to confide in you all that I acted on Jordan's invitation and visited Red Tail Ridge last week. It was a glorious day, and I was pretty nervous about trespassing, so I only made it halfway down this cracked grass-grown road before I turned around and came back to my car. It definitely felt like I was trespassing, but more so trespassing on nature, the two goldfinches, the raptor nests, and the high cottonwood trees, and the prairie dogs, and many more. I overcame some of my trepidation, and on my second attempt made it to the end of the road where the broken glass window sheds and impassable road begged for repair. And then I looked across the Northwest Parkway and saw the 5-story condominiums that loomed not too far away. And this time alone gave me the opportunity to recognize the value that our Louisville citizens have in the importance in nature and the importance to escape into nature.
Commissioner Howe, if I can interrupt for just a moment.
Yeah.
Director Zaccaro, I'm a little bit concerned to hear at this moment of this, and curious as to how we need to proceed at this time.
Sure. So I think one of the things is, so I think there was a statement about the applicant reaching out and contacting one of the commissioners, and then a commissioner conducting a site visit.
Right.
And so this is new information to me as well. So I don't know the details of what happened, but there could be concern about that contact from a process standpoint.
I could clarify that if you want to. At our last meeting, Jordan said, "Hey, I invite anyone to go and look at the property," and so I did go and look just to kind of get the bearings.
Okay, so let me just ask a couple questions, if I may. So did you visit? Did you have a discussion with the applicant about the?
Not at all. No. And I think the discussion, if you look back on the minutes, she said, "Hey, we welcome anyone to go and take a look at it." And I think it helped my perspective because I wanted to see what buildings were around and also what the land provided.
Yeah. So did you meet anybody there? Were you there alone?
No, I didn't meet anyone. Okay. I was there alone.
Okay. So, I guess I would say at this point, we typically don't do site visits. Site visits are discouraged, but if they're disclosed and there wasn't any, contact with the public or the applicant to discuss the application, and if Commissioner Howe states that, I think he's describing what he saw out there, I think that could be fine with disclosure, as long as there wasn't a discussion with the applicant or any of the public when he was out there. If he was just acting on the applicant's statement about visiting the site at the last hearing.
Commissioner Brown, let me know if you think it's appropriate for me to go ahead or not.
It is a cause of concern. We don't typically do site visits, right? And my concern is that it appears, per your statements, that the site visit has perhaps influenced your thoughts on this. So maybe if you can take that into account and share with us and can you continue on with your thoughts on the project.
I don't think it would change anyone's mind, according to some of the photos we've seen tonight, on the public or the citizens' viewpoints or photos that they've shown. I think it did help me to understand what the condition of the land was, and I wanted to see the surroundings, such as the Northwest Parkway, and see what kind of buildings were around that area. And I guess what I was just about to say was that there are some 5-story condominiums, across the Northwest Parkway. And the reason I bring that up is because I wanted to see what would be appropriate in regards to their proposal here. One of the things that we have to consider is what the appropriate relationship is to the surrounding areas, and this helped me answer that question.
Okay, yes. So please, continue with your thoughts then.
All right, I appreciate that, thanks. So having said that, I did value what the citizens have been talking about in their comments, which is the need to escape and enjoy nature, which we all enjoy in Louisville, and also balancing that with the development of this vacant land that needs repair. I think that the items that are most concerned that I heard the citizens repeat over and over were the flexibility. I think people are nervous that this locks Louisville into 20 years of development. And how valuable, I try to put myself into 2040. How valuable would this land be just as vacant land? As far as traffic, I think, and hardscape, I think we all have to accept that not only will Louisville become more busy on the roads, but with this development, we'll need to change the roads and the hardscape to accommodate the population in this development with the congestion. I think we all have concerns about sustainability. I think we talked about the revenue. The CTC's at a current occupancy of 80%. I think that's a reasonable expectation of occupancy for this proposal, and it seems like there is a benefit. And so when we talk about city benefit or the benefits of this proposal, I think jobs and revenue, 3.5% of increased revenue is a good amount, but we have to ask ourselves, does it offset the land that we're building on, the benefits of the land? And so how do we balance those two goals of the city? I think it creates continuity with the existing city, like Commissioner Deal mentioned, and an opportunity to possible opportunity to enjoy our open space if crafted correctly. So I would suggest for the commissioners, I would suggest 3 changes in this proposal. I think that the common open space should become city open space. As some citizens mentioned, there's a section 17.28.08.080. And I think we can assign maybe more open space, because in 2040, there will be more demand on the city for open space. I think by protecting the view shed around the pond, we can support a lot of the citizens' concern. And when I read the OSAB reports, I'll just read what they read as a conclusion regarding the clustering. And it said, OSAB supports clustering buildings and parking and to maximize open space and other open areas. Recognizing that building height restrictions cannot be waived, OSAB supports increasing building heights in exchange for clustering of the project as the project proceeds. There was also support for the pond maintenance. OSAB expressed its interest in preserving the area surrounding the pond in the northeast as a publicly accessible area. And I would go further to say that I think it should be open space. A couple more changes that I think we should consider. Section 17.28.120 says an appropriate relationship to the surrounding areas should be evaluated and achieved. And I think, as was suggested, the larger, higher buildings should be closer to the Northwest Parkway. I think that that would provide more continuity with what's already been built there. And maybe some discussion could take place to create a little bit more balance between that open space and the buildings. And then I think we need to have a little bit more forward thinking for sustainability, which I think was alluded to by Commissioner Deal. I think we probably need to think about more binding wording and commitment, not only for 2021, but also for 2040. I think the workshop with the planning staff was a good idea by the applicant to maybe get a little bit more, a little bit better verbiage regarding the sustainability. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Howe. We have a couple other people who have not yet chimed in. Commissioner Williams, do you?
Sure, I'll chime in now.
Thank you.
I just want to thank everybody involved in this project, the developers, and staff especially, and all of the public comment. I think that is extremely important to read and understand how residents feel about this parcel and the development of it. So I really appreciated reading those. I think that was my favorite part of this entire large packet. You should all know it was probably somewhere between at least 600 pages, maybe more. So just a little bit of light reading there. So I wanted to say a few things. I think we all agree that we want more open space and we want it all to be public. So I think that's kind of a common theme here. We're all looking for better sustainability on this project, more so like gold standard for LEED standards. So I think that that is something that we should push towards. I also think that it'd be great if the development was a little bit smaller, but that, you know, it's still close in the ballpark of what was met with ConocoPhillips before. It's a little bit, it's like 600,000 square feet more. I know that sounds like a lot, but this is a very large project, and we are still pretty reasonable as far as the square footage that we're using for developing. I think we should work on the last mile to get shuttles, people, so that they're not driving, using public transportation as much as we can. And probably my biggest, the biggest piece here that I'm kind of grappling with is we all kind of wanted a single user in the beginning, like ConocoPhillips, like Storage Tech was, and we're not, you know, that's a want. I'm not sure it's even a need at this point. We don't have anyone coming forward that is a single user, and that would have been nice. The reason why I'm grappling with this is just because it, how do I say this? A single user makes the development seem like it is wanted, like it's planned, like it is a viable use, and why we were actually developing this project, this parcel. When we come through with a parcel and we develop and we kind of create mixed use and we don't have any real purpose, that starts to bother me as far as this particular property, because why are we trying to bring more development in if we don't have a specific purpose of why we want to develop this property? If it's just because we want to see it built, or is it because we want a single user, or because we want you know, an industrial development here? I mean, the reason why I'm having such difficulty is we don't have a real purpose of why we're approving this, other than, and I will admit, and I agree, that this meets the comp plan. The iteration before did not. This definitely meets comp plan, and it has a lot of good features to it. It's just the one component here is the purpose of why we're building this, why we are approving this right now. So that's kind of the piece. Maybe someone else can speak to that, help me get there, but that's my biggest piece here. Why are we doing this? I mean, we want to, but is there a real need right now? Especially since we have other buildings that we can, that are vacated, and someone at least help me understand that piece.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Williams. Vice Chair Rice, I would certainly welcome your thoughts.
Thanks, Steve. So, I always think it's really important when we have these deliberations to always come back to the context of our discussion. And the context here, the only issue before us is an amendment to the GDP. That's it. We're not deciding all the other issues that relate to this project this evening. In fact, a project of this nature, size, and complexity is going to require a whole host of additional hearings and deliberations as we look forward. So with that in mind, I will tell you that I generally support the GDP as it's been proposed, but I also will come back and talk about the context a little bit, because I think there are some things that need to be addressed, not necessarily at this time. So here are the big broad stroke reasons why I support the GDP as it's presently, or the amendment to GDP as it's presently been proposed. The public land dedication issue. The land that is subject to public land dedication within this proposal comes out to roughly 309 acres. And the applicant is proposing 59.3 acres of that be a part of public land dedication. If I've done my math right, that comes out to roughly 19%, which is far in excess of what's required for a project like this. And so speaking to those who want more open space, want more public land dedication, you can always ask for more, you can always demand more, but I think these folks have made a very good, strong, good faith gesture towards that, giving essentially a fifth of the property over to public land dedication. The second thing that I find very compelling about the project is this whole issue of parking. I too read each and every line of each and every public comment, because I find that to be a very important part of what we do. And, I really take those things to heart. But one of the major comments that's been made about this project is that it's going to be a sea of parking lots. And all we're going to do is pave paradise and basically have nothing but parked cars all over this. And you have to look at the proposal and understand why that's simply untrue. I can't tell you over my last 7.5 years on this body how much time we've devoted to making sure people have enough parking on their projects. And we're usually concerned when they're just trying to be right at the bare minimum. Whereas here, the project is being proposed that the minimum is the maximum. And so right there, they're telling us that they don't have an intent to pave paradise and make this whole thing into a parking lot. The other thing is that because the parking structures have been eliminated from the FAR calculation, there's actually an incentive to build structures. And the beauty of structures, although architecturally they're not usually the most attractive part of a project, is that they have a small footprint, right? As compared to just some simple surface parking. So I really think that this parking issue is being proactively attacked in this proposal, and I appreciate that. Another thing to consider is the FAR on this project as it's being proposed is 0.24. Now compare that to what we saw last year on this same property, which, if I did my math correct, and this was 0.48, which is exactly a 1/2 reduction, exactly 1/2 of what was being proposed before. And, you know, you can always, again, people have different views on this, but I think for a project of this nature, I think an FAR of 0.24 is very, very reasonable. Now, the last thing that I want to point out, and I find this to be the most important part of what's going on here. It's maybe a minute thing, but it's the amendment that's been proposed to note number 2. And in essence, what this does is it incentivizes clustering on this project. And clustering is a good thing in general because that footprint we're also concerned about is going to be minimized if the clustering aspect of this works. And what happens when you cluster is you lead to more common open space, not necessarily city-owned open space, but more open space that we can all enjoy as we look across this project or go into this project or perhaps work in this project. It incentivizes that. And I would note that the applicant, as per my request, has said that they agree with that condition. So they are not quarreling with the condition that the staff has submitted in this regard. And I am very sympathetic as to the comments of Commissioner Deal about this business about where tall buildings are placed on this project. And as I understand the process, they aren't going to be able to build tall buildings in this project until they go through all these processes again, and we give the go-ahead and the city council gives the go-ahead. And I trust our good wisdom to make sure that those judgments are made appropriately. And so I guess I believe that that's been adequately protected. Now, I told you I'd come back to the context, and here's what I mean by that. So I too believe, as it sounds like there's a good consensus on this body, that we need to put more teeth into some of these aspirational things, the sustainability standards, the building standards, that sort of thing. But I'm not sure when's the appropriate time to impose those conditions. I don't know that it's at the general development plan stage, and I'd be very happy to hear the comments of my fellow commissioners on that as to when that would be something that would be an appropriate measure to take. It may be at a later part of this process. Last thing I'm going to say is this. This is not open space. It is developable property. And it's our job as a planning commission to not just by our actions, either by affirmative or by omission, to turn something de facto into open space. This is developable property, and our job is to shepherd sensible and forward-thinking development on the property, not to shut it down just because we think it ought to be open space. So those are my 2 cents. And I also have to say that tonight's deliberations are just Exhibit A in my statement I've made before of how the quality of the comments that comes from this body. And I constantly find myself re-examining my thinking by listening to what my fellow commissioners have to say. And Jeff, in particular, I really appreciated your history lesson here today. It really does put things into context, and I think is very appropriate and very educational, not just for the world, but for me too.
Thank you, Tom. I guess I would like to entertain that discussion of what is the appropriate time for kind of increased teeth on some of these sustainability concerns. And Commissioner Moline, to your comment, I don't know that we can say, oh, well, we'll just turn the verbal into a firm commitment. I'm wondering, because it's just not spelled out clearly enough in any of that, I don't think. So I'm wondering though, if people do feel that if this is the appropriate time to address something like that, whether a condition should be that they provide firm commitments before meeting with city council, if that's where this were to head. I don't know how else to address those concerns and welcome additional thought on that.
Chair Braudice, I mean, from my perspective, I guess a question would be, is it, from a process standpoint, I would lean to vote no against the amendment, just to basically make sure city council understands that we as a body, or at least me as a vote on that body, felt so strongly that the sustainability was not enforceable, was not specific, was not tactical in terms of what was going to happen, then that would be taken into account as they receive the application. I'd be open to if we could somehow construct language. I'm not sure we can, to create a condition to, create that document or that kind of enforceable language prior to the next step.
Well, and so it is a bit of a twist in process, but the thought is that the condition would be that the applicant provide binding commitments before they move in front of city council.
From my perspective, it's more than just taking what's been provided in what was, I guess, in a previous commitment letter, because they agreed to 2 megawatts of solar tonight. That is supposed to be in an amended letter that I don't think we've seen.
That doesn't, that's not enough for me. But
Right.
I'm saying that we don't know what we'll do this evening. We don't know what will happen next.
Right.
In either case, if we instructed that they should firm that up before presenting to council, at least that instruction would be made for the record, as opposed to if we don't address it, that would be a concern for me.
And then to Commissioner Rice's question, or I guess discussion point, when is the best time to make these, I guess, objectives known, right? From my perspective, the earlier the better, right? And that just shows the level of seriousness. To try and come back later, I think, it's not really fair to the applicant. They should know the rules of the road in terms of what the expectation is. That would be my input on that.
Thank you. Commissioner Moline, did you?
Yeah, I was just going to say I tend to agree with Commissioner Deal on that, and feel like that by requiring things at this stage, at this GDP stage, I'm hopeful that helps to sort of consolidate the expectations and the commitments in the overall development scheme, as opposed to having to rely on things as they come in for each particular parcel or subdivision proposal. So I also feel like now would be the time to kind of set those commitments up, or guarantee those commitments, I guess. So yeah.
Vice Chair Rice.
So just thinking aloud, what if we added a condition that essentially said that we would conditionally vote to approve the amendment so long as by the time the matter was submitted to City Council, binding commitments were offered with respect to building standards and sustainability standards.
And that to me seems like a good direction to make that point clear that it's not far enough yet, and really, I mean, yeah, I don't want to potentially hand City Council something that doesn't go as far as I feel it should either.
But the beauty of that is it would keep the process moving.
Right. Agreed.
And then the City Council, of course, is the ultimate arbiter of all this anyway. And so then they can decide, whether or not what's being offered is sufficient.
So would it be appropriate to include a requirement to work obviously with staff, but then also the Sustainability Board or other, I guess, relevant committees?
Sure.
Yeah.
Alternatively, we could consider a continuance, all right?
Sure.
That's the opposite of Commissioner Rice's point about or Vice Chair Rice's about keeping the process moving.
Any other thoughts?
In terms of the height issue, which is again my second issue, and Commissioner Moline, having been involved in the comp plan, maybe you can revisit history. Was part of that clustering and additional stories language having to do with the eastern part of the property, which obviously is the lower elevation, which by definition kind of makes it less prominent on your view shed versus having those additional stories on the western side or not?
You know, I don't know that we got into the detail, and Steve may have to recall, and anybody else who was on the board at the time, but I don't know that we got into the detail at the comp plan stage about where on a particular property that clustering would occur, but just rather that it would, I think Commissioner or Vice Chair Rice mentioned this too, that the idea of doing that clustering as a way to provide a greater sort of open space buffer around the project. So I'm not sure, I don't recall that we went into that level of detail, Commissioner.
Right. No, I don't believe we went into that level of detail, not in the comp plan.
Yeah.
So on that one issue though, I do think, right, from a pure environmental and even energy and space use perspective, from a sustainability perspective regarding height, when in the appropriate location, and view shed matters, that height and therefore increased vertical density as opposed to classic more vertical or horizontal sprawl, that height is a good thing. So right, but we know that that's not before us today. That's something that would be carefully examined in the context of the site as it potentially develops over time. So
What are other commissioners' perspectives on having 5 stories, 90 feet in a table that says parcel A of what's allowable? And then obviously in a development note on, buried on page 2 or page 3 of the GDP, you've got okay, nothing has been approved, right? And I think there's a little bit of, we've heard this term before, anchoring, right? We'll put 90 on there, and then when we go back to the PUD stage, we'll ask for 85. So
yeah,
I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I guess I'm not as kind of focused on that because the comment is there, right? Because that condition is there, and I trust that the process and people throughout that we're not going to lose track of that comment.
Yeah, I mean, if I could tag on to that, the note says that proposed maximum building heights in excess of the requirements will require city council approval through the PUD development plan review process and are not approved by this GDP. So, my thought is that that's pretty clear that they don't get that height unless they go through this process. And then, of course, as I've indicated, the condition as staff has proposed augments that note to then talk in terms of the clustering aspect to it. So, I'm of the mind that it's pretty clearly set forth that this is not a right. And in addition to that, I think the discussion here tonight makes that even more abundantly clear.
I'll comment on that just a little bit. I think the clustering of the buildings allows some discussion with the developers and whoever's going to make the buildings as to how you're going to minimize the footprint. But I think also when we talk about view shed, I think you have to think about what you actually want to provide to the citizens of Louisville and the surrounding areas. And this goes back to Commissioner Rice. I just want to challenge what you said, which is the amount of open space. But really in that southernmost portion, I don't know what parcel it is, but that southernmost portion that's on 36 and Northwest Parkway, that's the Boulder Broomfield County, and that's the majority of open space that's being dedicated. I don't find that that's of highest value to the Louisville citizens, mainly because it's the lowest portion of the property, I believe, from what I can recall driving by there. And I don't think citizens are going to necessarily spend a lot of time there. on the flip side, when you go to the north side of the property, if you're sitting on that pond, and when I think of where I go to open spaces when I'm walking the dogs or spending time with the family, those ponds are really valuable. And when I read the OSAB comments, that's what they said. They said we really would be interested in maintaining that pond, and that's the view shed that I think you want to maintain, is around that pond, looking west on the mountains. And of course, you have that with the open space and the parks right there. I think if you can control that view shed, that's much more valuable to the citizens of the city. You can do that by clustering, but you don't want to put any buildings between that to the west.
If I could, the portion that's being discussed that's down next to the highway, that's off-site. So that's not a part of the 59, or excuse me, the 59.3 acres of public dedication. That's an off-site issue, and I think that's not a part of that same discussion in terms of that calculation.
And
I believe you're right. I think the 59 acres is the area in green. But I think we just have to be clear on what numbers we're coming up with, because there's another dedication on the further south that may not be as valuable.
Off-site. That's in Broomfield County, I think, actually.
Correct.
And so it's off-site. It's not even what we're considering here. It's another buffer, but it's not part of the public land dedication that's being discussed in this proposal.
Is that what when you said the percentage of open space dedicated, was that part of your percentage or no?
No, not at all. So the difference is there's an 80 acre portion that's exempt from public land dedication because of prior annexation agreements. Okay, so what we're talking about is 309 acres, and then they've agreed to dedicate of that. Park trails, public safety land. So all of that exceeds 50 is the 59.3 acres, if I'm right. And then of course, a subsection of that is open space. Because we've got a park and we've got a public safety building and some other things too.
I guess I'm just trying to wrap that into the discussion about the view sheds and the clustering and the rationale as to those two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that the biggest impact is in this parcel A, where, Commissioner Rice pointed out very well that, the Monarch, I think the Monarch gym was 55 feet across the street. And, the GDP amendment, again, not binding, not a PUD approval, envisions a 90-foot, almost double. It's a mini office tower, right? And that to me changes the nature of a special rural district. Now, again, we're not approving that, but the applicant has said this is viewed as a guide, a roadmap to how this program will proceed. Now, we could end up in the PUD process, and we could say, well, no, we can't get our heads around 90 feet, so let's uncluster. And then obviously we would look at what that looks like, right? Then you've got obviously that dedicated open space gone, and just more space occupied by development. And I guess that's ultimately the trade-off.
So what about the clustering, but not 90 feet, 75 feet? I mean,
yeah, but I mean, ultimately, I don't think that's part of our GDP amendment discussion this evening, right? I mean, that is.
But neither is more open space, and we're asking for that too. So I mean, we can add new guidance into this. I mean, we don't have to take the 90 feet. We all agree that clustering is a better idea based on the fact that it allows less footprint and more open space. And I'm not talking necessarily of public open space, but just open space in general. So, I mean, if 90 feet is too tall, can't we just discuss, can't we put it on the table, clustering, but maybe lower than 90 feet? Because obviously that is a roadblock here. No pun intended.
So if Ben, if the column on the development program entitled maximum building height, maximum building stories, if that column had all these numbers eliminated and simply what's note number 2 as amended was there instead, saying that to the extent that you're going to get any building height in excess of ADS requirements, that will require city council approval. Would that solve your problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm getting more comfortable with the note. And I think we've made enough public comment here today. Chair Bronice and Vice Chair, you've pointed out it's not something we're going to let go. My concern is just that that's built in to the plan.
Yeah. So
5 stories, right? Yes, it's not approved.
Yeah. I'd say if we eliminated that column as an amendment in the development program and then just simply said all this is subject to note 2, would that solve your issue?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with the note 2, right, being enough of a security. It's more of the, I guess, just the messaging to the applicant that it's going to be difficult to get 5 stories approved. I think. I mean, who knows? We'll see what it looks like. We can probably move on.
Commissioner Deal, can I just ask you one more question? Would you, because it seems like you are, and I appreciate very much that you're saying these things. Would it make you more comfortable if the height allowance for the 5 stories, 90 feet was in a different part of the site too? Is that part of your concern as well?
Definitely. I think that was what ConocoPhillips envisioned. Obviously, Storage Tech was on the eastern side. Even Redtail 1.0, I think, had higher buildings further east.
Yeah.
So you did not have that dramatic of a change to this rural special district on the western side of the property.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point. I'm curious if others share that perspective, or if it is time to move on to another topic.
I'm okay to move on. I think we've made or at least my perspective well heard.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute. Wait.
Yeah.
So it's sub area A1 with the 90 feet, 5 stories that you have that issue. So why don't we just strike that?
Well, and I would say we don't have to strike it because we have a note in the GDP that says nothing's approved. Everything has to go through PUD. Everything has to go through planning and city council.
But the fact that it's there is a problem.
The fact that it's there and the fact that the applicant believes that this is the roadmap, a 5-story building in parcel A, or multiple 5-story buildings.
Well,
and I asked last week, I said, if you didn't get 5 stories, would that affect the viability of your program, your project? But then I think what we would end up having is an unclustered, less open space, which that might be worse. I guess we'll wait and see.
And maybe not. I mean, it depends on.
And when I say it might be worse, the 5-story building to me, going back to the comp plan, does it destroy the public view shed? Does it, basically, is it contrary to the comprehensive plan? It's not, my opinion.
Thank you. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I think that's just one of the, sorry to interrupt. I think that one of the 3 concerns that I had, and I'm not sure that I'm going to agree to small changes here and there when I think the more guidance we can provide at this stage will benefit everybody down the road. I think those are the questions that we probably need to nail down. I agree with some previous commissioner comments that I think this is the time to kind of get some guidance as to, and I think that we should take advantage of the applicant's offer to do a workshop with the planning staff. I think it's a good idea for that to happen at this point. I don't know how much additional work will get done once it's proposed to city. I think more work can get done in the preparation phase at this stage.
And I'm going to make one comment. the city council we have today may be vastly different in 5 to 10 years from now. It will be. And so that comment, will require city council approval through the PUD development plan review process. You've already put in parcel A is up to 5 stories with 90 feet. And so a different city council could see this and go, yep, no problem. You got it.
Well, I mean, a different,
Yeah, go ahead.
different planning commission and a different city council could just amend it as well, right? Same thing could happen.
Not
Sure.
that easily to amend, but I mean, if it's already in here,
Well,
it's
but
already,
there's this note that says that it's not approved.
but a different city council can look at this and say, it requires city council approval. And it says on parcel A, it's up to 5 stories, 90 feet. So it's already in here. So one city council can say yes, and another can say no. I'm just saying that you're subject to that.
Certainly, yeah. Nobody, right? I think we all agree that's kind of how it's designed at this point.
Right. So if this is literally, a roadblock that you can't go forward with this, then this is something to look at and maybe strike out. Maybe it's parcel A.
I'm a little bit lost as to.
Well, that you would take out the 90 feet, 5 stories in just parcel A, that you would agree if that is what the piece that you can't get past, that we don't want to happen, is 90 feet, 5 stories on parcel A, which is the highest elevation on this property. I'm just trying to prevent this. I mean, this can happen. It's in this GDP. So if it weren't in it, it couldn't happen. Do we agree on that?
Well, I would say it can't happen without additional approvals, either way, right? Whether we and then city council approved a height waiver through this process, or if they wanted to re-amend, it's either way, it's got to go through the same approval process.
Yeah, and anything can be requested. Right, so just the fact that this document speaks to this as a possibility doesn't mean that future requests for waivers for any number of requests, I mean, anything can be requested in the future. It doesn't mean that a future planning commissioner or a future city council would approve it. So Vice Chair Rice, you.
Yeah, I was only going to weigh in that I would not recommend incrementalizing this. So in other words, just removing sub area A1 from this chart, because that might then in and of itself imply that the others are okay. So to me, you either get rid of that column and those heights and simply say this is all subject to note number 2, which requires that city council approve anything above basic, or you leave it in as is subject to the note number 2. But I think just removing one of them, it makes it hopelessly confusing.
So I guess some final thoughts here for me. I can dream and wish and hope and wish that there was something else before us today. Commissioner Williams, to your question of why would we be developing this? Well, we don't develop things, right? The market does, whether it's residential, and it has been pointed out that many of our houses are on spaces that could have been similar to this space pre-1978. It's the market that does. And so we have a proposal from a property owner in front of us today that meets the comp plan and that has addressed a number of our concerns. And so at this point in time, I don't know that we're going to be able to fine tune even this height issue, right? I mean, by design, the height issue has to come up again, both before future planning commissions and city council to go anywhere. And ultimately, to my recent comments, I feel like, this is not something that the height issue in particular is not something that we've said we want to hear more about. It just is something that's come up as a result of the process at hand. So any number of issues are going to have to be addressed, both by future applicants in front of future planning commissions and future city councils. So for now, at least, I'm leaning towards approval. I'm curious as to whether people do want to see some sort of a condition regarding kind of instructing, requiring that the applicant address putting some more firm commitments to sustainability issues before they were to move forward.
I just want to say, though, that this parcel had a specific purpose in the comp plan, and that was a single user property of some major company coming in, and that is what you've had planned for, you know, decades. And so that's my, I understand the market drives what is built, but this is the city's property. Well, not city's property, I'm sorry. This is part of the city. This is part of the public participation in what goes here. And so we're discussing basically, you know, what the purpose is. And the purpose originally for this particular property was always the single user. And so that's why I had reservations on, you know, why are we, you know, why are we doing this? So that's where I was just going with that. And I understand that the market drives what is being built, but we all as a city also decide what we want in our cities as well. So.
You know, if I could just build on that just a little bit too, is I just be honest with you all, I'm still really struggling with the sort of overall concept of the plan. And I'm not asking all of you to share your thoughts, but if anybody's interested in sharing your perspective about, does this, yes, it sort of, I think we all sort of agree, it kind of meets the rural special district guidelines in the comp plan. Some of the kind of environmental comments and the housing comments, the jobs housing imbalance are really weighing on me. I mean, we know we have a housing shortage, and this really exacerbates that problem. And so I'm really struggling with that, and whether or not those kinds of elements or those kinds of concerns can be considered from a comp plan perspective, you know, that sustainability, housing, environmental. So if anybody has thoughts about that.
No, I appreciate you bringing the jobs housing balance issue up. I don't think we have to look too far back to see why there's no housing in this proposal, right?
Right, exactly. I know. Yeah, right.
But the citizens spoke out very loud and clear, saying they wanted no housing on this property.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, great point. Thanks, Steve. Yeah.
And housing wasn't on the comp plan for this.
It wasn't. I know.
And also, Commissioner Moline, I think
you're concerned.
Yeah.
So
I think
point
that
of order, we've hit the 10 o'clock hour.
Oh, sorry.
No. It's all appreciated.
It sounded like Keaton was going to say something. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I believe he was. I just wanted to check in with people right now as to how you're feeling about the time that we want for this issue. It's very late.
Yeah.
I would like to wrap this meeting up this evening.
I think there's no question. Do we want to draft a condition related to sustainability? Somebody want to propose some language?
I think I would go with what I said before, that we would add a condition number 5 that would essentially say that before this matter comes before City Council, applicant is to provide binding obligations with regard to, proposed binding obligations with regard to sustainability and building standards.
I'm probably not in favor of smaller conditions. I don't think that this meets what we will need in the future for Louisville's socioeconomic conditions and open space. I think that needs to be looked at closer. I think that we need to really look at what the appropriate relationship to the surrounding areas is. I'm not sure designated one area for certain building heights and another. I think you have to look at it comprehensively. And I think that the sustainability is a big issue too. I'm not sure you can patch just like that. I think there's a lot of work. I think this gets us closer, but I don't think this is the end result that I'm actually looking for.
Tom, do you want to make a motion?
Well, I would defer to the chair. Would you like to entertain a motion, Chair?
Certainly, yeah.
Okay. All right, so I would make a motion for approval of resolution number 5, series 2020, including the 4 conditions as suggested by staff, and adding a 5th condition that would stipulate that before this matter is presented to City Council for its approval, that the applicant add binding proposed obligations with regard to sustainability and building standards.
Thank you. Do we have a second for the motion? I will second the motion. And with that, I would request a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Deal,
No.
Commissioner Williams,
No.
Commissioner Moline,
No.
Commissioner Howe,
No.
Vice Chair Rice,
Yes.
Chair Bronice.
Yes. The does not carry. With from a procedure perspective, we would need to come up with a document. Director Zakara, I see you turning your camera on there, instructing why it did not carry.
Well, I think you've got a couple options here. I think you could make, I mean, you could wait for another, so it's getting late too. And so I'm curious if you're interested in more time or more information that would help you make your decision, which would have to be at another meeting. You could also, somebody could also make another motion. So that motion didn't carry, but that doesn't mean somebody else can't make a different motion until one carries. You know, it could be a motion for approval with a different condition. It could be, if there is a denial, you know, we'd probably want to rewrite a different resolution like we did last time and bring it back. But again, I think you've got a lot of different options right now, rather than just kind of ending it with the motion that didn't pass.
And I would certainly also entertain a motion to continue. But I do think we need to give, well, I think the applicant has listened to us. So if we continue, is there any specific information or what are other people thinking at this point they would like to do?
I would make a motion to vote on the proposal. So the motion is item to vote approval or denial of the motion. That's what I would suggest. I'm not making that motion, but that's what I would suggest us do. I think we're at that point. I think we've talked about it a lot.
Well, we just voted no on that.
But that was for the motion that was motion for the 5th, to add the 5th. The motion was made to add the 5th, to vote on it with that 5th contingency. And that motion was denied. So we're not voting on it with the 5th contingency. So it goes back to general discussion from what I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong. Then now you can motion to vote on it as it is.
You would move, I think what you're saying is you would move to disapprove the proposed amendment.
Director Sakara, you spoke to some other thoughts here.
Right. So I think if the direction that you want to go is to disapprove because you have concerns, so there's a couple things here. I think if you want some revisions, you could also ask if the applicant is willing to work on some revisions. They've heard a lot. They could come back with some more information or some potential revisions to try to address some of the concerns they've heard. Continuing it to the next meeting could also allow you to, individually formulate questions or motions or conditions that could be presented to the group at the next meeting. If you wanted to move it along tonight, I think you probably need a motion for approval. If you're not, I guess my issue too is I don't think that you're wanting to vote to deny, right? So I think by allowing the motion to not pass, there is no resolution going to city council. So we're trying to figure out what's the appropriate resolution. So I think what I'm hearing is you need maybe more time to craft conditions, or maybe the applicant can come back also between now and the next meeting and proactively try to address some of the things that they've heard that would inform your potential conditions at the next meeting as well.
But wouldn't that require a new public hearing?
No, this would just be
now you have a different proposal then.
Okay, so yeah, if there's substantial changes, then yes, potentially we would want to renotice the hearing. I'm thinking if they're making some changes to the development agreement language, for example, or the sustainability plan, that would just be a continuation of this hearing. I think we often do that where the applicant can present some additional information in between hearings. If there's a substantial change to the application, we would renotice it.
And so from particularly those of you who voted no against that one, what are you feeling? Would we like me to check with the applicant to see if they're willing to come back with proposed changes?
Yeah, I mean, my challenges, as I've probably mentioned multiple times, are just around this height issue and the statements made that this is a roadmap and a guide to how the how the project will evolve. And I find that that's incompatible with the language in the comprehensive plan. So
would you like them, so just as an order of process, question of process, what are the rest of you all feeling as to what you would like to do process-wise, not the issues at hand? Right, so we have the option of asking the applicant if they're willing to come back with changes to the proposal. I am a little bit uncomfortable with the question of how do we designate these as to whether they're substantial changes or not, and whether we need to renotice and have a new hearing. But if that's what we want to see, then there's no problem with moving forward with that either. Or we can move to continue it this evening. But at that point, we're just stuck staring at our same little pictures and discussing the issues at hand.
well, is there the possibility that there would be 4 votes with just the condition? I mean, I guess no, right? My no vote is around the 2 issues, the height and the basically, I don't want to repeat it, and then the sustainability. Is that everyone else who voted no? Is that your 2 issues as well? Or does it go beyond that?
Those are good comments. I think for me, it probably goes beyond that, but the sustainability is definitely a part of it, Commissioner Deal. So that would help.
Ditto all those exact same words. I completely agree. It goes beyond that for me, but the sustainability is a huge piece.
So, Commissioner Deal, I'm curious here if you're sensing that we would have votes to approve it without the proposed 5th condition? I mean, the fifth condition was focused exclusively on ensuring that sustainability issues are addressed in a firm approach when they present to city council. So,
I'm wondering if you might be able to get some yes votes if we, basically deliberate a little bit longer.
Okay. But do you think dropping, is anybody saying?
No, that, I think everybody, that's probably unanimous that that condition is required.
Okay, okay. So what are you proposing?
I would propose chair and vice chair try and convince.
2 more people to.
Yep.
Well.
I gotta admit, I got lost a little there. What are you proposing, Commissioner Deal?
Oh, obviously the motion didn't pass. So do we want to deliberate further tonight or continue? In the hopes of either, understanding everyone's no vote and what it will take to move this along, or it ends in a denial. I think that's the 2 options, right?
At that point, because it's after 10 o'clock, I am open to a continuance if we need to discuss it to better understand the current no votes.
I'm not really open to a continuance in the fact that I don't think anything more that we discuss or bring to the conversation is going to change anything based on the information we have in front of us.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mirror that, Commissioner. I think that what's before me, I think I understand it very well. I think I've heard a lot of good comments about it. I think we've had a good discussion, and for me, it just seems like there's enough of substance that I think just convincing 1 or 2 commissioners about 1 or 2 small things may not be enough for me. I think that there needs to be, as I highlighted those 3 items before, you can refer to the record about that if you want to. But those three things, I think, are what needs to be identified. And I think as they suggested, a workshop with the planning staff, I think would be a great idea to work through some of those issues, create a better proposal that everyone was unanimous about. I think that would be the most ideal. So I think for me, I think a vote on it tonight would be appropriate item, but we have not voted on the final project yet. And I'm not sure a continuance will answer any more questions for me.
Well, so it makes me wonder, should we just make a motion to deny it and see where that goes?
I think that would give the developer an opportunity. They'd have to go back through the process again, but I think that would give them an opportunity to do some of this homework for us one more time and get to where everybody wants it to be.
So I would just say, if you do want to vote for denial, again, we'd want to create a resolution. And so typically what we would do is want to put some findings for your denial together for the resolution, and we'd bring that back at the next meeting. Then the applicant would have a couple of choices. They could certainly, revise the application and try to come back to this body with a new notice public hearing with the revision, or they could proceed to city council with the record that was made this evening, including the resolution that would, presumably ultimately be approved by you, approved for recommending denial. So that's kind of how that would play out if you recommended denial. But
And I guess one of the concerns there too is we would potentially end up right, because they have the option of moving forward to city council without our input at this point in time. I mean, obviously it's input, but without any additional input from us as to some of those thoughts, that we may not see it again. So.
So do we want to craft a motion to deny? Is that language that has to be created?
So I think you would make a motion to direct staff to draft a resolution of denial to bring back at the June 10th meeting for your consideration. So we'd want to draft findings, based on the input that you've provided on why you're not supportive of it. And then you could discuss findings and change the resolution at that time. So again, that's just one option. You could still continue to the June 10th meeting as well. Staff could potentially, that could give anybody time to draft conditions, including staff. Staff could work on condition language based on the input you've provided. We'd certainly consult with the applicant and bring back condition language. We could also bring back 2 resolutions potentially. So here's just another option, I guess. We could bring back a resolution of approval with potentially a couple new conditions based on the input that we've received, or a resolution of denial. And you could have 2 options in front of you, and you could adjust the findings during that next meeting. Just trying to maybe brainstorm some ways to move this forward.
I mean, I'll just say, what you just mentioned, Rob, sounded really appealing to me. I guess I feel like I have I still have some pretty major concerns, and I feel like that it would be, I'd be a little challenged at this point in time tonight to be able to kind of fashion something. And I really like the idea of you being able to potentially work with the applicant and get us some options for the next time. That all sounds really appealing to me. So I would be willing to move to continue the meeting to June 10th. And I realize that might be disappointing for some of you.
I would accept that motion and even second it if need be.
And I'm curious if I don't know what's appropriate here, but I realize, well, maybe I would ask Rob, is it appropriate for us to ask the applicant
Well, I don't think you have to. You certainly can consult with the applicant at this point. I think it's very appropriate for you as a body to not rush a decision. And if you need a little bit extra time, these are very complex issues. You spent a lot of time on it, but we've spent, and the applicant spent much more time.
Right.
And so it's okay, I think, for you all to feel, I want you to feel comfortable that you've had adequate time and adequate information. But it's if you want to let the applicant speak, that I think that's okay as well, to get their opinion.
Yeah, I would like to go ahead and do that. I see the applicant is here.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. Excuse me. We would respectfully request a continuance so that we can work with Rob. We can absorb a lot of the feedback. We got a lot of feedback from the commission just right now. And we would just love the opportunity to have the continuance, to work with city staff and address the concerns in hopes of coming back and being able to present something to you that you do approve.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So we do have a motion to continue on the table. If we can have a roll call vote, if people are comfortable with doing that at this point in time.
Yeah.
10:20. So that, okay. I would like to go ahead with a roll call vote then, please, on the motion to continue.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Moline,
Yes.
Commissioner Howe,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rice,
Yes.
Commissioner Deal,
Yes.
Chair Brownice.
Yes. Motion is continued to the June 10th meeting, I believe it is. Thank you all very much. We look forward to seeing what happens next. We do have a request to continue another item on our agenda. Item C, the St. Louis Parish and Boulder Innovation Campus Filing 2 PUD and plat.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Brownus. We actually have 3 additional applications that were on your agenda tonight. And so while it's probably not feasible that you would get to everything, I think at this point, on the June 10th agenda, maybe not. But for now, I think we'd request that you continue all 3 of those items to June 10th, and then we'll reach out separately and talk about maybe further continuances or schedule discussions with you. But for now, unless Director Zucchero disagrees, I think we would request all 3 be continued to the 10th.
Yeah, I think 3 separate motions for each one to June 10th. And then we can we'll start working through the queue.
Thank you. Then I would entertain a motion to continue 950 Spruce PUD SRU and plat to the June 10th meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it carries. Motion to continue Avid for Adventure Mural PUD to the June 10th meeting.
Motion to continue.
Second.
Thank you. Carries. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Is this, Rob, am I getting this right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
great. And I would also entertain a motion to continue the St. Louis Parish and Boulder Innovation Campus Filing 2 PUD and plat to the June 10th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it carries. And we do have next on our agenda, Planning Commission comments. And with that, I would actually like to open it up to Vice Chair Rice if he wanted to speak a little bit.
Yeah, just very simply, this past Saturday, I gave the mayor notice that I will be resigning my position on the Planning Commission effective the end of this month. And the reason for that is very simple. My wife and I have long planned to move to Tucson, and I had originally expected that that would occur after my term ended here at the end of this year, but circumstances have changed such that a unique opportunity came up in terms of a real estate purchase, which we entered into, and then our house here sold faster than we were ever able to anticipate. And so we're going to be moving to Tucson in June. And so not only would it make it impractical for me to participate, but it also would make me ineligible to serve on this commission because I would no longer be a resident of the city of Louisville. So the practical effect of all that is that this will be my last meeting on the Planning Commission. And I expressed this in some length in a written note to the mayor, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of how much I've gained in terms of my own knowledge from serving on this commission, and what a great opportunity it was to have these responsibilities and meet all the people and learn from them, and engage the public in the way that we do on so many occasions. And so it's been a wonderful opportunity, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. But unfortunately, it's coming to a slightly premature end.
I guess I would begin with thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Your participation on the commission has been absolutely invaluable. You've been phenomenal in helping us shape our thoughts, shape our approach at times, understanding kind of some of the basics of how we're meant to approach any number of issues. Thank you.
Yeah. Boy, what? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. And I'm going to miss you immensely. You are amazing on this commission in the fact that you help guide us and bring us back to the bigger picture. And I really, really appreciate that. And I might have to call you just to like get that bigger picture sometimes. But enjoy Tucson.
Thanks, folks. And I also would be remiss if I didn't give my wholehearted thanks to the staff. I mean, the staff has always been great in all the years I've worked on the commission, and I mean this when I say it, the current staff is the best. I mean, this is the best staff we've ever had, and they're also unfailingly pleasant to work with, which makes our jobs a lot easier. So Lisa, Rob, and I guess Amelia's on the phone here too, or on the call too. Thanks, Amelia, all you guys for all your hard work.
Oh, sincere thanks to you as well. It's been nothing but a pleasure to learn from you and work with you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Good luck in Tucson. We're going to miss you a lot.
It's a byproduct of a lifelong of winters, guys.
No judgment. I get it, right?
Commissioner Rice, I feel sorry for the next person that's going to take your spot because it's going to be big shoes to fill.
Yeah. I'm sad that I didn't get to spend more time on the commission with you, Tom. I think every meeting I learned something. So I appreciate the leadership and all your knowledge.
All right. Well, good luck, guys. You got a boatload of issues in front of you, and so good luck as you move ahead.
Are you going to join the Planning Commission of Tucson?
No.
Yeah, I echo everything that everybody just said. And it's been a wonderful 7.5 years, Tom, to share the dais with you. And you've been such a teacher to me. I really feel like my service to the community has really been increased by watching you operate up here. And boy, I just wish you the best in Arizona, and I'll just really miss you. So really appreciate it.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, Tom, you always self-summarize. You make my job so easy.
That's great.
Gonna miss you.
All right. Okay, guys. Well, good luck. And how about, would the chair entertain a motion to adjourn?
Let's really quickly to see if there's any additional staff comments.
No,
only
nothing.
that-
Go ahead.
Yeah, nothing that we'll be reaching out on an overflow date.
Yeah.
Other than that, no comments.
With that, I would entertain a motion from the vice chair.
I move to adjourn.
All right.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Tom.
All right. See you guys.
All right.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.